Hello and welcome to yet another video. This is the 7th episode of the series in which Naruto confronts the reality of shinobi life. Following the battle at the bridge in Wave, Naruto turns a new leaf and begins training seriously. Please like and subscribe to show your support. Let's get the show started. It took Naruto mere moments to recognize the two figures in front of him. And that's part of what didn't make any sense. How could there be two Kushinas? It simply didn't make sense. That is, until his mind at least somewhat calmed down, and he began hearing Tsunade's explanation. Seals, and from both what she said and what he had seen, only one name came to mind, Orochimaru. The array was an incredibly complex one, and it was impossible to tell at first sight what it did, but there were telltale signs that told him everything else. And with Tsunade's medical findings he knew exactly what he was dealing with, at least as far as the main array was concerned. He remembered the picture back in his home, taken mere weeks before he was born, and she looked just the same, which was impossible for a span of 14 years. Strangely enough, he never even noted that his mother was completely naked while contemplating all of that. From all he had gathered he could safely argue that the sealing done on her was a stasis one, that kept the body in cold sleep, but also prevented it from aging for even a moment. A stasis seal like that could keep a person frozen in time for centuries, only to release them later on, completely unaffected by the passage of time, as if mere moments had passed for them. However, in this case, it wasn't the only seal in the array, as some even allowed outside forces to affect the body. But that mattered little to him right now. It was the second information that truly enraged him. Beneath that seal, his mother was half dead, infused with a number of highly toxic substances, some of them snake venom, plant toxins, even mineral poisons, a truly lethal concoction that would drop an elephant dead within seconds, let alone a human being. Orochimaru liked playing things safe, and the stasis that kept the poison from circulating into the body, making it a perfect failsafe. The moment they would break the stasis seal, his mother would be sentenced to death. By Orochimaru's actions. The following plans to annihilate any trace of the snake's existence while tormenting him for days on end were easy to understand. The second woman seemed to be a younger copy of Kushina, who while staying mostly silent, spent her time taking care of the older one. Considering the activities Orochimaru indulged in, it actually made sense that she was a younger copy of his mother, as he didn't put it past a mad genius like him to master such a feat, or to perform it. For all his will, however, he couldn't bring himself to care as to what his objectives were. His eyes were focused solely on his mother, and tears were slowly flowing out. For all his life he wanted a family more than anything else. In recent months that wish was tempered by his growing love for Anko, but to know that his mother was alive, if not well, and to know that there was someone responsible for separating them. There would be hell to pay and he would find a way to save her, that much he promised, and Naruto never went back on his promises. Tsunade watched the boy sadly as she explained her findings to him. She also didn't mention that Kushina was rescued by the younger version for the simple reason of the location she was rescued from, an underground complex belonging to Orochimaru, and mostly used for experiments on people. Something she also had zero tolerance for, as most of her new healing techniques were developed using either her own body as an object of study or extensive research to cover for it, and in a few truly desperate cases, where patients were at a dead either way position, she tried previously untested procedures if it gave the patients a chance to survive. She didn't go around kidnapping people and vivisecting them to increase her knowledge. And the look on the boy's face told her he shared a very similar, if not worse opinion of her decidedly former teammate. She wasn't a saint, she knew as much. She was an alcoholic, a chronic gambler, and had trust and commitment issues with her home due to the simple fact that she lost almost all of those she cared for there. The only ones left were Jiraiya, who was out of the village most of the time, and Sarutobi, her sensei, but there were still wounds from him as well, and wounds she had dealt Jiraiya, and all over Orochimaru, because at first, she trusted the snake more than she trusted Jiraiya, labeling him as a pervert and as being jealous of the short affair the two of them had. Only to later find out that Orochimaru wasn't nearly as nice and kind as he'd made them believe. Of course, the fact that her sensei reassured them, and later on didn't believe her when she first told him what she found out didn't help maintain the same fate she had in him. It took finding the laboratory belonging to the snake Sannin to lift the wool of the old man's eyes, and even then he couldn't bring himself to stop, or better yet, kill his student. It was a mistake they all paid for dearly. And now this mistake had probably destroyed the life of one of the few people she truly respected in her long life, Kushina Uzumaki. Oh, she knew her well enough, and the sheer determination and grit, or stubbornness as some would claim, the woman was legendary for was a part of it. Her kindness and devotion to her friends was closer to a sibling's or a mother's than a friend's. And then there were the parts she was ashamed of, that were the reason that Jiraiya no longer greeted her with his usual gusto and jokes that she had to admit made her life a lot brighter. That, and there was the satisfaction of whacking him in the head when he acted too perverse for anyone's liking, which, she had began to doubt over the years, he probably did to make her feel better. And then she just abandoned him, just after she learned that his prized pupil, the boy he loved like a son, had died sealing the nine-tailed fox. Instead of staying and at least offering some comfort and aid, she invoked her traveling rights as soon as the situation at least seemed stable and left the village with Shizune in tow, effectively crippling the medical care in the village, and very likely leaving Kushina to be captured, however it happened, leaving her son at the mercy of the village. And she did hear what happened to the young boy, but she didn't connect the dots at the time, being too deeply immersed in her own losses or drink. She could safely argue that there were three potential reasons she could be called back. The first of those would be to stand trial. While not very likely, her escape hadn't won her many friends on the council, and while her great skill was her strongest argument, to them, it was more of a commodity, unless they desperately needed it for themselves. Politicians were like that. The second would be if they needed her skills. This scenario seemed to be the most reasonable one to her, and while she would probably have to hurry in that case, she certainly wasn't leaving Kushina behind a second time. What was left of her principles had been hardened by the years, and leaving a patient behind was something that she would not do. And then there was the third, to her probably the most unreasonable. Sarutobi was a man in his years, quite old, and honestly, he had lost a lot of the edge he once had, and it was possible that he wanted a replacement. She knew full well that he didn't trust Danzo, and for good reasons, and very few others apart from her and Jiraiya were good candidates. And honestly, she thought Jiraiya was a better candidate for a Hokage, but she would serve as a better political figurehead, as the Senju clan was deeply respected, even if it was essentially dead, with her being the last surviving member, and being past the age for bearing children, even with her vast medical knowledge. It was at that time that an idea came to her mind. As distasteful as it sounded, Orochimaru for once may have had a usable idea that didn't require maiming and mass murder. But there was a lot of work to be done first. And peace to be made as well. How did the two of you end up here? Jiraiya surprisingly politely asked Shizune, while Anko remained silent, feeling left out of the conversation since she knew very little of the girl. Tsunadesima got called by an old friend, Kaishasama, requesting her help for an unusual medical case. Shizune kindly explained, the small pig in her arms oinking in agreement, but when we got here, we saw the two of them, and it made no sense. According to the tests, both of them are Kushina. It was at that point that Anko decided to wisely insert herself into the conversation, seeing that she at least knew something of the actors, and it would do her good to be on the good side of her probable future mother-in-law, if only by knowing her better and trying to help her son. Wait, isn't Kushina Naruto's mother? She probed, an action noted, but uncontested. Jiraiya simply nodded before continuing, she is, but she also vanished. From her hospital room, half dead from giving birth to Naruto when Kyuubi attacked, only to reappear here, equally half dead from what I can see, only with added poisons. Isn't that right, Tsunade? He quietly asked, dragging her into the conversation as well. She turned before replying, poisoned, and very badly at that. However, she also still has all the markings of a mother that had recently given birth, meaning that she spent about a day at most before she was sealed up like this. Most likely still unconscious from the sedatives that are still in her system, she spoke in a business-like voice, careful to hide any emotion. And that leads us to the woman that brought her here, the second Kushina Uzumaki in all but age, she quietly added, as the younger red hair turned towards them with a slightly worried face, as if worried that they were going to hurt either her or her older twin. "See, can I help you somehow?" she asked in a scared voice, worried by the analyzing look sent by Jiraiya, who had by now noted the seals on the older Kushina's body, and just like his student, completely ignored the fact that she was naked, kept warm by a thin cover and several warmth seals set up by Tsunade. The fact that she was in stasis apparently didn't mean that her body couldn't be hurt, simply that it couldn't age or be active. Wounds, poisons, disease still accrued once she was out of stasis and back in the normal flow of time. "Would you tell us your relation to her?" Jiraiya asked in a fatherly tone, calm, warm and eternally patient. The girl nodded before beginning her tale. By now Naruto had mostly recovered from his rage, and was being hugged by a worried Anko, who was whispering words of comfort, while internally swearing to tear her dear sensei a new one, with a rusty spoon. "It's actually quite strange. My given name is Kisi. I was born 12 years ago, a child born from a tube as I would later learn, a mere copy of another person originally. It was strange at first, seeing an older me placed on a metal slab, all covered up with seals. At first I asked the man who was obviously to me at least, my father, Orochimaru, if mommy was okay, while he would simply smile, and say that she was sleeping. I was actually raised rather well, I suppose, being well thought by him as he needed me to be an agent of some sort." She stopped for a moment, remembering a better time, but then frowning again. "That was until I learned exactly what he did to the woman who was my mother and to me. He needed an identical copy of Kushina, to the point that even her soul matched, so he made that seal to separate half of her soul and built a body from her cells around it. From what I gathered from the papers Orochimaru left behind, I am what he calls a clone." Jiraiya was calm, but serious the entire time, as he listened in detail what was done to the two of them, looking for any sign of falsehood in her statements, almost hoping it was there, since what Orochimaru did basically sentenced the two of them to death unless a miracle was pulled. A soul was not meant to be separated, but if proper force is applied, it's not that difficult to do. Creating said force was though. Since the soul was torn in half by seals he recognized, it made sure that if one part of the soul died, the other would join soon, as well as the part that left for the afterlife drew the one that stayed behind from the body it was in an attempt to become whole. Souls didn't simply vanish, as a few deities apparently took great care about things like that. In any case, unless he could find a way to complete their souls, which was pretty much impossible within the realm of his knowledge, the two of them would die as soon as Kushina was released from the seal. Not exactly a cheerful prospect. Still there were a few others who might know more, and ridiculously enough, one of them might be Naruto. He decided to go at this one step at a time. "Alright then, you're related to her, that would make you her sister? Daughter?" Jiraiya asked in a mildly confused voice, but still mirthful, which brought a slight chuckle from Tsunade. Most of the tension was broken, but Kisi was still slightly worried how her remaining relative would react. To her pleasant surprise, she felt a hand on her shoulder, and turned to face Naruto's brightly smiling face. He didn't mind. When it came to people, Naruto wasn't the type to spend hours considering whether they were trustworthy or not, he simply went with instinct. While that might be a foolish direction for a normal man, to him it was a finely tuned sense developed over some 7 years of almost daily practice, even further enhanced by his lightning-quick intellect and an ancient demonic fox stuck in his belly. Kisi, for all her strangeness at the moment, something that he couldn't rightly blame her for, seemed to be a decent girl, and considering that she's her, well, mother's clone, she likely has the same or at least a very similar personality as her, and from what he'd learned about her, he certainly wouldn't mind having a younger sister like that. And damn it all, he'd figure out a way to save them both. I certainly don't mind having a younger sister, he cheerfully added, eliciting a wide smile from the girl who immediately jumped on him and hugged him, not noticing a slightly evil grin forming on his face, or an aunt, he lightly jibed, instantly provoking a reaction from the girl as she playfully bonked him in the shoulder, and bringing about another round of laughter. I prefer sister, she happily persuaded him, and makes me feel old. The comment of course brought another wave of chuckles from Jiraiya, Shizune and Anko, while Tsunade's mask finally began cracking up a bit. Naruto let go of his newly appointed little sister, to take a closer look at the seals covering his mother. Oi, Ero-sensei, could you talk to Tsunade about the reason we traveled this far north while I take a look at what that snake did to my mother? Hi, I will. Don't get your panties in a twist, Jiraiya replied, inwardly groaning about the disrespect of youth, and stop calling me that, will you, Gaki? And should I call a chicken a duck as well? He quipped back as he once more turned his attention to the seals. Kisi? Could you help me a bit here? He kindly asked as the others left the room. That's some apprentice you've got, Jiraiya, Tsunade soberly commented as the two of them shared a drink in one of the studies that Kaisho offered them to use. He's one of a kind, Jiraiya seriously responded. If I had to guess, in about 4 or 5 years he'll surpass me in skill. Still, are you sure it's wise to leave him to check the seals? Prodigy or not, there's no chance that, she asked, but was quickly interrupted. Right now, the only people I know of who at any point knew more than him about seals are Orochimaru, me and Minato. And I'm pretty sure that will change very soon. Besides, he needs some family time. You don't learn that you have a mother and sister every day, no? He replied to her worries, fully aware of her concerns. He'll be back in a couple of hours, likely along with a very accurate description of the seal, along with a few holes he couldn't decipher, and with a decent idea how to handle it. If he doesn't, I'm sure that his furry friend will be more than willing to help him out, so I'm basically stuck here discussing old times with you. Scary, isn't it? He teased. He had decided to give the woman one more chance, since she had at least given the boy back his mother. Yeah, it is, came her answer, already giving up on being worried about some things. She stopped for a moment. You never told me exactly why you came, Jiraiya, said man sighed, showing the weight of the age on him. Sarutobi-sensei has asked me to bring you back to be the next Hokage, he finally spoke as an uncomfortable silence descended on the room. Tsunade had a pained look on her face, as the title reminded her too much of the losses she had suffered. Her fiancé, her younger brother, not something she was fond of remembering. Before she could respond, the door suddenly opened, and Naruto and Kisi entered the room. Shizune had plenty of reasons to smile today, so she did just that as she joined Anko for a stroll on the fortress ramparts. Anko had been rather quiet for a while now, seemingly in thought, while maintaining a light conversation with Shizune, mostly retelling the news about Konoha, and a small smile was etched on her lips when she retold what she heard of Naruto's involvement in the battles. Shizune listened intently, half awestruck, half disbelieving at her descriptions of Naruto's feats of skill. Anko on the other hand enjoyed talking about what was fast becoming her favorite subject, and the crazy blonde she loved was quick to provide new material for gossiping. She also found Shizune to be a kind person, one of those who gladly offer their shoulder to cry on, and yet she knew rather well that the girl was not to be underestimated. Any medic worth being called apprentice by the slug Sannin was to be feared. That's a bit too much, Anko-san. While I believe that he's Jiraiya's apprentice and that he's good, what you're saying makes him a jounin at least, Shizune jokingly commented, but the smile faded quickly when she noticed the serious look on Anko's face. Think so? So did a lot of others, most of them ended up dead, or captured, she stated in a quiet tone. Catch him off guard and he's as good as any other chunin, if not a tiny bit better, but let him fight on his own terms, or worse, give him time to prepare, and it's a completely different thing. And that's before he gets really serious, she deadpanned. Besides, didn't you hear? He single-handedly routed the army that was invading, and killed 2 chunin along with them, all without a scratch. Don't get me wrong though, unless he's trying to intimidate someone he won't begin talking about it. He'll just say something along the lines of it being his job. Enko finished her statement, leaving absolutely nothing to complain about. Not that a rather shocked Shizun had any ideas how right now. 12 o'clock, Konoha, office of Ibiki Marino, ANBU headquarters. A great day indeed, Ibiki mused as he finished writing the last report. The joy of finishing work by noon was something he hadn't felt in what seemed to be years, and to think that he actually finished everything, broke one of the surviving of the Sound Four, as the two others accepted amnesty in return for all of their knowledge on Orochimaru and knowledge of all of their ninja skills. It was a good deal for Konoha, as their rather unique skills actually could be replicated. Both Taiyuya and the weird pair of Sakan and Yukon were wise enough to understand one simple fact: now that Orochimaru didn't need them, they were a liability that would get killed at the first opportunity. Why not ensure that the bastard gets a much harder job while evading some of the more unpleasant jail locations, or worse, public execution? Heaven forbid. There were of course several other reasons for merriment. Cho and Sei, the pair of Earth ninja delivered by Toads, were more than willing to say everything after just a few hours of persuasion. While he was abhorred by the pitiful training, he certainly wasn't about to complain about people making his job easier, and the freshly updated maps and numbers were always useful. With all the military buildup during the past few months, finally finishing up on this rather boring job, he decided it was time to handle his pet project of the last week or so, and headed off to the archives while checking up some of the folders in his hands. Much to his dismay, the feeling he had was right on target. Something was going seriously wrong in Konoha, and he'd be damned if he didn't find out what. The ANBU archives were more of a subterranean warehouse than they were a room, as row upon row of shelves kept far too many reports to count. If one didn't know what they were looking for, they could spend a years here without finding it. Walking along the dimly lit lanes, he slowly counted off 75, 76, 77. This should be it. Ibiki quietly spoke to no one in particular as he enumerated the shelf rows while he passed them, stopping by a completely inconspicuous one, all of them apparently were, and entering said row. The 20 meters of shelves covered with scrolls, stacks of paper and tomes of varying width contained the information he was seeking. Now, all he had to do was dig it up. Simple, no? 1600 hours, Land of Whirlpool, Nadara, I figured out the seal, Naruto shortly announced to the pair in front of him while Kisi was slightly worried. She watched him study the seals on their mother, Kami. How weird that sounds, and she had to admit that she was completely impressed. Naruto remained completely focused on the seals, only writing things down in a small notebook every now and then. The look on his face betrayed the perfect concentration in which his mind worked, a state which had room for one thing, and one thing alone, the breaking of the array on Kushina's body, and her salvation. It was something that she could appreciate, being trained in various ninja arts for years by Orochimaru. She never did figure out why that madman took such good care of her, but she did find out that he needed Kushina to open a vault door somewhere around here, most likely in the very fortress they were in. She shook herself out of her thoughts as Naruto continued speaking. So? Jiraiya quickly asked. Full body stasis, the snake bastard's a miracle worker. The main array keeps my mother in stasis, while at the same time allowing such details as drawing out a blood sample, and affecting her with medical jutsu. How the hell he did it is beyond me. I had to identify what most of those life arrays did just by studying their effects, so I made sure to copy them all. It is possible to break open or unlock the seal, and that's where the trouble comes in. Should it be broken, the seal will force her body to flash through all the years she spent sealed, giving the poisons plenty of time to kill her, and leaving us unable to do a thing. But if it's unlocked, nothing happens, apart from the seals breaking down entirely. Still, for that I'd need an amount of Orochimaru's chakra to serve as a key, and the only sample we have is in Anko's cursed seal. Naruto reported to a calm Jiraiya and a completely stunned Tsunade. Kisi, after watching him work for the better part of an hour, wasn't overly surprised by how much he managed to gather. Have you finished the research on the cursed seals? Jiraiya once more inquired, keeping a calm mask, but inwardly laughing his ass off at his old teammate's reaction. The thoroughly shell-shocked face was worth it. Hi. I have an almost fully developed method for removal. However, I also have an alternative in mind that will not only eliminate the cursed seal from Anko, but will also allow me to harness Orochimaru's chakra from it, and use it to open the array. He stopped for a moment, and that's where my plans hit a snag. I lack a proper ability to neutralize poison, he added with a downcast face. To his surprise, it was Tsunade who spoke next. Are you sure you can do that without harming Anko or Kushina? The veteran medic asked, only to receive a quizzical look from Naruto, as if asking her if she was crazy. I don't know about you Tsunade-sama, he slowly said, but when it comes to those who are precious for me, I play to win, he added as he walked out. You know something you old perv? I like that kid of yours, Tsunade commented with a wry smile. If he can do what he said, I'll come back to Konoha. At least with people like him around, things won't get boring, that much you can be sure of, Jiraiya jokingly responded before getting up and leaving. As much as he didn't want to, he still had some work to do. Tsunade threw one last look on her old friend before getting up herself. She had work as well, if she was going to be of any use. Anko felt reasonably nervous when her boyfriend asked her out of the blue to talk about something important. Shizune had already left, and the two of them were alone on the ramparts. The cold winter wind that was blowing made her grasp the coat that was keeping her warm, and draw it even closer in an attempt to keep at least some warmth from the frigid weather. So, what did you want to talk about? She quietly asked, tucking most of her face under the collar of her coat. Naruto softly smiled before putting his hands around her, letting her bask in his warmth. Promise me that you'll let me finish before trying to kill me, he asked in an almost jovial voice, to which Anko merely snorted. I'll take that as a yes. After Kami knows how many attempts and time spent researching, I've figured out how to break your cursed seal. I was planning to make it a surprise for when we get back home, but I have a big favor to ask of you now. Go on, Anko whispered, barely keeping a lid on her emotions. Could he finally rid her of the brand that's been messing with her life for so long? Will she finally be able to move on with her life? I need to do the, ritual now if I'm to save Kushina. I need Orochimaru's chakra that's stuck inside the seal in order to disable the other 1 inch, he explained, while Anko kept listening. Are you sure it will work? She hopefully asked him, almost disbelieving that she could have a chance at her freedom from it. It will. I promise, Naruto quietly added, a smile covering his face once he saw the one on Anko's. Then I'm all yours, loverboy, she answered, and grabbed the back of his head, pulling him in for a kiss. How does it work? She curiously asked after their lips parted. I rip out all of his chakra from your seal, overload the inert remains with converted medical chakra, send out Orochimaru's chakra into the other seal, and Tsunade takes over from there, he quickly explained. That sounds simple. Why hasn't anyone tried it yet? Anko asked, keeping a rather bemused look. Because you need several highly complicated arrays to make it even possible. I accidentally came across 2 of them while digging through my father's book, and figured the rest from there, he responded. Come on, let's go back inside. I'll do the whole thing in the morning, but I think we can persuade the owner of the place to get us a free room for the night, eh? I second that, she added in a much happier tone as the 2 of them left the ramparts, laughing. Tomorrow morning found the 2 of them lying closely embraced on a bed, covered by a thick blanket, both barely dressed in anything, and both completely awake. Anko spent her time tracing the lines of various self-made tattoos on his skin, most of them various seals serving to enhance his already formidable abilities. He, on the other hand, was content to lie down peacefully with Anko's head nestled in the crook of his neck. And he hated the fact that they had to get up very, very much. With an annoyed sigh, Anko was up first. Come on, Naruto-kun, we both have to get up. Work to do and all that, Anko offhandedly commented as she got up to get a shower. The room was pleasantly warm, as a currently invisible heating system kept a stable room temperature, high enough for both of them to walk around lightly dressed, even if it was winter. The manor belonging to Lord Kaisho was a comfortable place, even if it was somewhat large, it had a homely feeling to it. With a light groan, Naruto got up as well, and went off to perform his morning rituals, laying a single kiss on Anko as she went out. Surprisingly, the room they were given was more of a suite than a room, as it contained its own bathroom, along with a decent-sized bedroom/living room, the whole set most likely meant for visiting diplomats or dignitaries. He walked into the small bathroom which had all the basics and moved into the still steaming shower, quietly letting the warm water soothe his body. He really wasn't in the mood for anything other than this, as even his empty stomach opted to stay quiet, letting him settle his thoughts for the day ahead of him. Let's see, first there's the ritual, breaking Anko's cursed seal, unsealing Kushina, spending some time with Kisi, talking with Tsunade about improving my medical skills a bit. Yep, that's it for today. Nearly 15 minutes later, he turned the water off, and grabbed a towel to dry himself off. He peeked out and noted that Anko has already left. He walked back into the room and got dressed in a hurry, all the while mentally checking if he still had everything covered for his work. Anko was nervous, and understandably so. Her life was changing, and for the better, ever since she'd met a kid that saved her life several months ago. Much to her pleasure, a single bad mission ended up improving her life in more ways than one. The shell she hid herself in ever since Orochimaru betrayed her was breaking apart, and her old self, the girl she had been before, was slowly returning. Apart from when she was at work or in combat, the more sadistic part of her personality was gone. One could even go as far as to say that she was once more becoming normal, according to ninja standards at least. She lazily twirled the spoon in her cup of coffee, watching the mesmerizing whirlpool her action created. Whirlpool. Great, now I'm connecting things like a love-struck schoolgirl. What's next? She wondered as she pulled another sip of the hot beverage. Coffee was a commodity here in the north, and it was only her status as one of those who helped liberate the city that provided her with access to it. She was quickly joined by said boyfriend, and the small kitchen was soon filled by the smell of breakfast. Kisi smiled as she joined the young couple for breakfast, happy that the young man who had accepted her as his sister had thought of her as well. Her older brother, she mused that she'd have to get used to it, not that she minded, had prepared a plate of food for her as well. Jiraiya watched the proceedings from a safe distance, a ghost of a smile present on his lips as the Suntobe family bonded. It was a rare sight these days, as the world knew very few moments of such peace. His only regret was that there were two people missing there, something that he would probably blame himself till the day he died. He had little doubt that at some point in the predictably near future Naruto would propose to his girlfriend, and with his immediate family growing, it should prove interesting. Also, he reminded himself, he'd need to make certain factions don't get any clever ideas. He owed his pupils that much. Several hours later, the whole group was led by Lord Kaisho into an underground chamber, walls covered by eerily glowing sigils. In the middle, all the necessary supplies were neatly stacked together, and a pair of clones was depositing Kushina Uzumaki on a blanket on the floor until Naruto could finish preparing the necessary arrays. Unsealing the papers he needed, Naruto once more rechecked everything before starting under Jiraiya's watchful eye, as this was his show, and the grizzled veteran was there just as support. The first set of seals functioned as a barrier, keeping all the chakra that would be released from the two bodies sealed within the room, followed by a second that would serve as a conduit for Orochimaru's chakra into Kushina's body, along with a container for it to delay the second portion of the ritual so that Anko could be properly checked up and healed if necessary. The second set of arrays were there to strengthen the bodies of the two women, even if it was only temporary, it helped with the process. A third set surrounded the area where Anko was supposed to be, and it served to rip out Orochimaru's chakra, while a smaller array sent it through the barrier conduit. A fourth surrounded the ground where Anko was supposed to lie, with the express purpose of helping Anko's healing after that chakra was removed, and making sure that it all went out of her system. The final two arrays were highly complex chakra amplifiers, made to enhance the effects of any medical jutsu applied by either Tsunade or Naruto. All in all, his most complex word to date. From his perch inside Naruto's mind, Kyubi watched the proceedings with a hint of pride, as the Boiternman created something that few twice his age would have the skill to make, and the combination of seal arrays wasn't that far off from the one his father made to contain him. Part of him wanted nothing more than to once more freely roam the lands, to smell the sweet fragrance of the spring winds, to explore the world once more. But he gave up on that a long time ago, when he accepted that his immortal life would end the day Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze died. He chuckled lightly at the thought. Perhaps death, no, change would not be such an unwelcome experience at some point. For now though, the world of human interaction was interesting enough to keep him entertained. He smelled the winds that blew across the mindscape and made a mental note to thank the boy. Wildflowers, near the borders of the city. A pair of shadows moved quickly with a goal in mind, careful not to attract attention. Which, considering their attire consisting of black cloaks with red clouds, was quite a feat. Anko was slightly nervous as she lied down in the middle of the array circle. It didn't help that Naruto asked her to remove any upper clothes from her body so that they wouldn't interfere. Strangely enough, the two males in the room didn't need any effort not to leer at her revealed body, both watching the events with a hint of curiosity, Jiraiya occasionally explaining some of the seals to the others, while Naruto spoke soft, comforting words as he finished the last seal that went around the curse mark on her collarbone. A short look at his eyes told her that everything would be fine, those calm, determined eyes that she fell in love with. "Love?" she asked in a soft tone, instantly bringing his look, along with a gentle smile, to her. "Yes," he replied, ready to do anything to make her more comfortable. The smile didn't fade when a hand snaked its way around his neck, pulling him closer. "When this is all over, I'm rewarding you for everything," she whispered to him with just a hint of lust in her voice, just enough to bring a grin to his face. He shook his head lightly, and still grinning went to work. "Are you ready, Lady Tsunade?" he asked in a professional tone. "Hi, just get your part of the job done, and I'll do mine. A little warning though, it'll be a day or two before she's awake after this. Her body was under a lot of strain, so she'll have to rest." "How long before she can travel?" Jiraiya asked, trying his best not to sound heartless, and holding an apologetic smile to Tsunade. "I'm giving her 2 days tops before she gets out of the bed screaming from boredom," Tsunade noted in annoyance, a number of chuckles quickly following. "Well, here goes." Naruto softly spoke as he began channeling his chakra into the array. Kishi watched the events with a childlike curiosity. Orochimaru, for all his faults, was an excellent teacher, and while he taught her the basics of sealing, it had nothing on what her older brother was pulling off. Taking an alien chakra from one body and using it to open the seal on another? She doubted the idea would have even occurred to her. She noticed that Jiraiya was also impressed. And if her hunch was right, that was no small feat. She watched as the ritual began. Out of all of them, the person least focused on the events was Tsunade, although even she had to admit that Naruto's rating as far as she was concerned was up and climbing. She was busy watching over all of Anko's vitals to observe as Naruto used the array inscribed around the seal to rip it open and remove all of Orochimaru's chakra from her body. She was also too busy healing the relatively light amount of damage to hear Anko's grunts of pain as her own chakra flooded the seal, along with her medical chakra, permanently burning it off. Naruto grunted as well, as he controlled the extensions of his own chakra that formed the barrier which kept Orochimaru's chakra in one piece, just the way he needed it to finish his work. "Tsunade, how is she?" he grunted out, hoping for a bit of good news. "In perfect condition, although she's out of it for now," she stated, popping a single chakra pill into her mouth. "I am ready for the second phase." "Proceed." "Understood." Naruto responded as he began moving the vile energy towards the body of his mother, more accurately towards the seal that covered it. He had studied it in detail, locating every single trap he wove into it and planting a counter to it, even the strengthening seal, which couldn't be maintained on a moving body, was there to help her endure the effects of the final trap Orochimaru had set, the many poisons that still coursed through her veins. Just as Tsunade moved to her, he channeled the chakra into the seal, forcing his own chakra to work as a control for it. He smiled when he felt the array breaking down without any unforeseen effects, and watched Tsunade go to work neutralizing poisons. He let out a tired sigh as he let go of all save the seals that helped Tsunade keep his mother alive, while he himself made plans how to help out. For all his impressive intellect, Tsunade found Orochimaru to be a complete idiot at times. One such time was now, as she discovered that quite a few of the poisons he used were simple to eliminate, or worse, for him, actually served to force the organism to fight against the stronger ones. A poison that would kill a normal man would have trouble with the body of a shinobi, as they conditioned their bodies to survive against constant damage, something that made healing their bodies from almost any ail much easier. It did help that the body subconsciously molded chakra to help out the healing effort. A wry smile crossed her lips as she began drawing out the poison, all the while maintaining a strong flow of healing energies into Kushina's weakened body. Her smile vanished in an instant as she felt a small capsule dissolve into Kushina's bloodstream. "Naruto, we have an emergency. Jiraiya said that you could create healing chakra. Can you do it now?" Tsunade shouted. "How much and where?" "Give as much as you can and channel it into her entire body." "Got it. Sensei, maintain the strengthening array." "I can't do both at the same time," Naruto ordered, and Jiraiya obeyed without question, maintaining the faltering seal as Naruto prepared to do his work, but as all of his senses screamed that normal healing wouldn't be enough, he decided to go for the overkill, and pray that things turned out right. "Radiance, overflow," he intoned as his eyes once more flared blue, only to shift into a bright green moments later. The entire room was now flooded with healing chakra, all of it focused on every living entity in the room, most notably Kushina. There were more than a few surprised eyes who watched Naruto float of the earth, lifted by the incredible amounts of energy he had been releasing from his body. However, the light soon changed from the radiant green, into a far darker one, as Kyuubi's chakra mixed with his own impressive reserves. There was no malice, no hatred, no inhuman pressure that took the breath out of your lungs, only a warmth, very similar to that of a mother's embrace covering them all. A bright light hid the entire room from the sight of all, and soon, Naruto knew darkness once more. 12 o'clock, Whirlpool Country, Nadara, estate of Lord Kaisho. Kushina Uzumaki awoke to what was probably the worst headache of her life, blissfully unaware of the time that has passed since she lost consciousness. She rubbed her aching head, trying to remember where she was supposed to be. Yes, the Konoha Hospital. Then why the hell was she in her old room in Nadara? As far as she could remember, she had given birth a scant few hours ago, and yet, her body was in rather good shape. She then remembered exactly what had happened before she lost consciousness. "Naruto, oh Kami, no, I'm too late. Damn it, I have to protect my son." This rather kind and motherly, if a tad late line of thought was interrupted by a small cough coming from a worried Tsunade who had noticed that she was awake. "Calm down, Kushina," she spoke in the most calming tone she could muster, and being rather nervous didn't help much. "How do you explain the events of the past 14 years to a woman for whom time has effectively stopped?" "Tsunade? Why are you here? Didn't you leave a week ago? More importantly, where is Naruto? Where is my son?" she asked in panic. "Jiraiya, I'm going to kill you for convincing me to do this," Tsunade muttered as she calmed the woman down to explain to her what happened during the time she was in stasis. Unlike his immediate family and friends, Naruto was apparently far less fortunate, as Kishi, Jiraiya and Enko found out. In the middle of the chamber used to perform the ritual now stood a large, sapphire blue crystalline structure that served as a tank of sorts, connecting the floor to the ceiling, and suspended within its liquid was Naruto, still unconscious. It was easy to see that he was breathing, even though he was completely submerged within. The crystal was nigh indestructible to normal means, as Jiraiya, rather painfully, found out. Any ideas how to break him out of there? Kisi asked in a rather worried tone. I'm not so sure that it's a good idea, Shizun offered. That fluid inside has a very high concentration of chakra, so breaking it open might be dangerous to him. True. Still, there's one even worse thing. How do we explain this to Kushina? Tsunade said that her body is recovering at an insane rate, and that she should be okay within hours instead of days. And Kami knows you don't want to be on the receiving end of her rage, Jiraiya shakily commented. He certainly remembered what happened the one time he accidentally, as weird as it sounded in his case, peeped on her. Minato had to hold her back while he ran as fast as his legs could carry him. Not a pleasant prospect that. So he's stuck in there and there's nothing we can do? Enko asked, a hint of sadness and helplessness present in her voice. How many times did he help her, and now that he needed help she couldn't do anything? Look! Kisi shouted as she pointed at a few symbols that began appearing in the air outside the crystal. We'll be out soon, the symbols clearly spelled out before fading away. Bloody little genius. Jiraiya muttered under his breath as a faint smile tugged at the corners of his lips. Within Naruto's mindscape, it would be curious for an outsider to watch the rather chaotic landscape of Naruto's mind. For now, the verdant plains were gone, replaced by a number of broken rocks floating within a maelstrom of chaotic energies, a light very similar to moonlight illuminating the twilight world that Naruto and Kyuubi were now in. It would also be interesting that they were playing chess, and contrary to the usual, Kyuubi was being beaten to a standstill. There was a third fact to note, however, one that was probably more important than all the others. There were a total of 4 Narutos present, each one unique in a way. The first of them was dressed in his white coat and wore the mask that signified him as the White Wraith, rather than Naruto, and instead of talking, he mostly released unintelligible, but bone-chilling sounds and hisses. The second was a childlike depiction of him, bearing that real, million-watt dazzling smile that could melt the heart of even the most cold-hearted of people. A third stood nearby, sparring against the first, bearing the Song of the Wind unsheathed in his hands as he stopped every blow, a hard, yet warm look on his face. And then there was a fourth one, the one who sat down with Kyuubi and played chess, easily beating the ancient fox at every step. He bore a cold, calculating look, hardened features of a man that has seen decades of war and survived, not a boy of 14. In his eyes glinted an intelligence that frankly scared Kyuubi, one that was no longer tempered by immortal limitations that even he was subject to. Whatever limits he may have had, Kyuubi was ancient. Ages of experience taught things that raw intellect could not surmount, as the quantum leap in logic lacked the information and pure chaos to work. Cold, mechanical logic had its flaws, as it was completely incapable of inductive reasoning, an advantage that the Naruto he knew over the last 14 years was very quick to use. The 4 figures were unique each, and his reasoning came with the conclusion that they must represent important, no, crucial parts of him, broken from the whole when the whole mess went to hell in a handbasket. The White Wraith, a physical incarnation of his killer instincts, a heartless monstrosity that lived only for pain and killing. The Guardian, or Protector, which term you preferred, an image of his desire to safeguard his home and precious people. The Child, which represented what innocence and kindness he had left, along with his ability to bring out the best in others. And finally Logic, the cold part of him that provided his rather impressive intellect, and now that it was untangled from the whole, was even more dangerous. He knew that none of the 4, not even his innocence, were to be challenged, as they all possessed a strength equal to his own, most no longer constrained by the presence of others, and in combination they were him. Thankfully all 4 of them agreed that they were part of a whole, and they would reunite, but there was a part that scared him deeply. A part was missing. The healing ability he invoked scant hours ago drained him both physically and mentally. There are things mortals are not supposed to be able to do, and rebuilding souls through the use of one's own spiritual energies was one of them. And to think, all it took for him to draw on all that power was his desire to save them. Funny how things turn out. The drain had effectively sent his mind into a forced coma, as the human body wasn't meant to function on zero key, and the logical part of his mind took over, forcing the failsafe measure that even now protected him. All that came at a rather worrying cost, as it shattered his mind into the now-present components which stood before him. The problem was, once they began reuniting, there was a good chance he'd become the fifth part, completely surrendering all of himself to his mind. Now, to take things into perspective, to an ageless being, the concept of death was even more abhorrent than to an ordinary mortal. Even worse, a loss of self was downright horrifying to him, even as the light compulsion to belong began settling in, the result of the given word not so long ago. A word given in goodwill, was binding to a demon, something he knew once he gave it. He did not expect this to happen though. Mortality was a rather interesting concept to be observed when you're unaffected by it. It's almost time, the guardian Naruto stated, 5 more minutes until we all merge. What is your decision, Kyubi? Logic asked in its cold, mechanical voice. Don't worry, whatever happens, you'll still be there, Innocence added, that bright ever-present smile reassuring whatever doubt might have been there. Wraith merely hissed at him, a white, near-skeletal hand raised in a threatening manner. 4 minutes. Will you join us, or will you stay behind? We cannot force this choice, Logic once more asked. I will stay behind, he calmly responded, and do some work of my own. This is a far too valuable opportunity to waste, Kyubi inwardly added, waiting for them to depart. An oath was what he had given, and oath was what he would uphold, even at the cost of personal sacrifice. 1300 hours, Nadara, Seal Chamber. For the second time this day, Kushina Uzumaki Namikaze had trouble working with the information she was given. She accepted the story that Tsunade had given her, especially after Jiraiya confirmed it, as much as she didn't want to. Her husband was a master of seals, and she had seen firsthand of what they were capable. But what was known in front of her pretty much surpassed everything she saw. The chakra-saturated fluid within the tank had begun swirling madly, the color shifting between a light green and a crimson red as wisps of energy snaked around Naruto's body within the crystal. Out of all of his clothes, only his pants survived, and even they were badly burnt by the energies. A mute scream disfigured his features, forcing a cringe in all those present as a trail of bubbles fled from his mouth. What's happening to him? Kushina asked in a broken voice. Damn me if I know. But I'm willing to bet Kyubi is behind it, Jiraiya answered stoically. The surface image was just that, an image, hiding the internal turmoil in hopes of keeping the wife of his late pupil calm. The water soon stopped churning as the figure within adopted a far calmer pace of breathing, and a pair of shining blue eyes opened. Symbols one more began appearing outside the crystal. Stand back, I'm coming out, they spelled out before vanishing. Eyes widened as Naruto's hand rose from its place at his side, now extended forward and facing the surface of the crystal. As Naruto spoke mutely again, his lips unreadable for the ripples around him, the crystal and the fluid within receded, slowly melting away into nothing more than pure chakra that was quickly absorbed by Naruto's body. A few pieces broke off, falling harmlessly to the ground as Naruto collapsed to a knee while breathing heavily. Before he could even get a chance to speak, 3 figures had already reached him, his mother, his sister and his lover, all of them enveloping him in the warmth of their bodies as they hugged him, chasing the chill he felt within the crystal away. Kami, that hurt like hell, he muttered in a tired voice, as a low chuckle escaped a pair of lips suspiciously close to his ears. Not funny, Heim, Naruto added in an annoyed tone, bringing out full-blown laughter from those around him. A small smile crossed his lips at the sight of what remained of his family, as his eyes fell on Kushina and Kisi, while he felt Anko's hands snake around his shoulders in a strong hug. I'm not going anywhere, love, he commented as he placed his hand on top of hers. I know. But I'm still not letting go of you, Anko retorted, laying a single kiss on his ear. Now move your ass, I want to meet my future mother-in-law. A number of suppressed chuckles escaped at the comment, along with a groan from Naruto. Why must women be so troublesome at times? Damn, now I'm becoming another Shikamaru, just great. Can this day get any worse? Well, at least I get my family. A wide smile forced its way to his lips at the thought. Family, the one thing he never had, the lack of one thing that damaged him more than anything else in his life. He had long since forgiven both of his parents for his lot in life, and was truly looking forward to seeing whatever could be salvaged back together. He pushed back all of the memories of pain that screamed at him, trying to accuse anyone of the suffering. The past will stay in the past. He would not let it rule him. "Hey Mom," he near whispered to the woman before him, a warm smile adorning his face. At this moment, Kushina couldn't find the words to speak, and chose to let her actions do the talking as she embraced him, tears falling from her eyes while she sobbed. She had many doubts of this moment, all born during the past hour or so. He could have easily rejected her, and considering that she wasn't there his entire life, she didn't have the right of being called his mother, and yet he used the term so easily, so naturally, as if she'd been there the entire time. It was comforting, heartwarming. She knew that Minato was dead, she knew he would be even before she lost consciousness all those years ago. But her son was alive, and as strange as it sounded, she also had a daughter. The instincts of motherhood were going a bit haywire over the situation, but she found out that she didn't mind having 2 children instead of 1, even if things were complicated for the lack of a better word. Seriously, how does one behave in a situation like this? They adapt, she mused as she lifted a hand to wipe away the tears and gestured to Kisi to join them as well. Lord Kaisho had long since chosen to retire from the room, leaving the people to enjoy their moment of closeness, something he believed would be wrong to intrude upon, and Jiraiya, Tsunade and Shizen agreed, so the 4 of them left them to talk in private. They weren't the only ones however. Within Naruto's mindscape, a certain fox went to sleep, leaving the boy behind with those close to him. Naruto sat down after changing to more comfortable clothes, sitting only in pants, regardless of how entertaining it was to some, wasn't a good idea in the middle of winter. Anko soon came back with both tea and sake, though he chose the former. They were back in his and Anko's room, sitting wherever it was comfortable. "So it's been 14 years, Kushina tried to start. "Naruto, Kisi, Don't." Naruto stopped her attempts at an apology. "It's not your fault, in fact I know exactly whose fault it is, and he's already on my hit list. So don't fret over it. If you could have been there, you would have been there for me, and if this hadn't happened, it's very likely that Kisi wouldn't be here." Naruto explained his reasoning with a half-bitter smile. Kushina couldn't help but smile back. "Do you know how much are you just like your father?" "It's scary," she lazily commented. "I get that a lot. I've never met my father, so I make my guesses from what people tell me about him," he quietly replied. "Who's his father?" Kisi curiously asked, her own gap in knowledge at least somewhat understandable. "My late husband, Minato Namikaze," the older woman answered in a somber tone. "The former 4th Hokage of the hidden village of Konohagakure." "Ah." Kisi eloquently returned, and an uncomfortable silence descended on the room. It was a strange sentiment to all of the 3 females in the room, each of them feeling like they didn't belong. Kushina because she was absent for all those years, Anko because Naruto had found his family, and she felt like she was intruding, and Kisi because she felt that as a mere clone she didn't belong with them. Naruto noted the awkward atmosphere and decided to do something about it. "Why don't I cook us something up? I bet you're hungry after all that time," he jokingly stated, instantly breaking the tension. Anko licked her lips in anticipation, remembering just how well her lover cooked. Now there was something to look forward to. "I'm fine with that," she cheerfully added, while Kushina raised a worried eyebrow. If he was so much like his father, would he be as miserable a cook as he was? She shivered at the thought, turning to her, daughter, and the girlfriend of her son. Anko she remembered a bit. It had been a year before the Kyuubi attack that her family was killed during a high-profile mission, so Minato personally made sure she was taken care of. But that was the last she remembered of her. Now, that little girl of so long ago had turned into a grown woman, tempered by her life and hardships in ways she could only begin to guess. Kisi was little better, a grown-up not by her choice, if her features were anything to go by. Just how much had she missed? Still, better late than never. The kitchen proved easy to find, and even easier to work in. The problem came, however, when Naruto attempted to remember the recipe of the dish he planned to make. It wasn't that he couldn't remember the recipe, far from it. He remembered it in vivid detail, along with almost every one of the 5 instances in which he prepared it, down to the smallest details on how he chopped the vegetables or cut the meat, the small changes that came from different amounts of spices, and many other subtle inflections which would normally be lost on him. Standing dumbfounded with a large knife in his hand, Naruto tried to remember the process of making a standard exploding tag, and found that he could recall it perfectly, from the first time he sat down to make one, to the last one he made a week ago. Along with that, he had a perfect mental image of the array, all of the small seals and connections which went into it, as well as a mental list of the amounts of chakra he used to activate it, along with the results. It was like having a working library, along with a librarian sorting things out near instantly. Out of curiosity, he tried it with one more subject, the few parts of bingo books he read, remembering Kakashi's entry. What he remembered was every single detail, sorted by relevancy all down to the editions of Ika he saw him reading, compared to those he saw printed. Suffice to say it was an enlightening experience. One he already knew who to. Considering he probably saved my ass and helped out with my memory, blame would probably be a bad choice of words, quite correct. Kyubi's voice echoed in his head, "You did something during the healing which nearly shattered your mind. Thankfully, your head does a good job at fixing itself, otherwise you'd be gone by now. How do you like the, upgrade? You rewired my brain, just how the hell did you do it?" Naruto asked in a mix of curiosity and annoyance. It wasn't all that easy, he admitted, but the moment your mind separated itself into parts, it became somewhat malleable. From that point onward it was merely a matter of forcing a trait to surface. "And here I thought you built something new," the young man jokingly stated as he sent his body on autopilot to make lunch. "Very funny boy. You read too many of those stories where demons give mortals strange gifts beyond their limits. Even immortals can only do so much with such a frail form. If it wasn't there, I wouldn't be able to coax it out. A similar thing went with your elemental affinities, you already had the seed, my presence merely forced it to grow. Now, if I may offer a piece of advice, try using that chakra art of yours on a larger array of seals," the ancient fox explained and advised. "There is something else first. You said that my mind separated. Explain, since I obviously don't remember." Naruto calmly demanded, and was much surprised to be met by silence. "I should not have let that slip," Kyubi spoke in a low tone. "Understand this, Naruto, what I'm about to tell you stays between the two of us." A short mental nod later, Kyubi once more began, "When Tsunade asked you to give healing Kushina your all, you did just that. The ability is called Forced Resurrection, and it fuses demonic Reiki to the human one, while channeling both directly to the soul of the target, rather than the body. You literally ripped 2 pieces of your own soul, used it to reform the halves that Kisi and Kushina held to 2 full souls, and then used an amount of my Reiki to restore your own. The fact that you purged a dozen deadly poisons from your mother's body is a joke compared to this," he ranted on. "You managed to reforge a soul into 2, something not meant to be done by hands both mortal and immortal, and you did it on pure instinct and desire." Another pause, which Kyubi used to calm down and let the message sink into Naruto. "You also managed to separate your own mind and soul in the process, into 4 distinct parts, each of them an avatar of the most important parts of your personality. However, there was a 5th part missing, and I have no idea what it is, but that's the part you used to restore their souls, and that's the part you rebuilt using my energies. In other words, your soul is now part demonic, meaning that your Reiki is also part demonic now. In other words, you'll find it a lot harder to mold chakra. Naruto remained perfectly quiet for the entire time, analyzing the given information with great care, and then sorting it out as needed. What are the other consequences? He asked. Kyubi smiled. His container was quite smart when he wanted, or needed to be. While it will be a lot harder to form chakra, it will be more potent, so once you manage to reach this level again, it should be far easier to use chakra-consuming jutsu. Also, there is the fact that your chakra will be by all means truly unique, making it far easier for any tracker to find. He explained before adding a personal, mental note, better not tell him about them yet. Kami knows what they would do if roused. Now of all times. With a final sigh, Naruto returned his focus to the food he was preparing, only to notice that he prepared about 5 times the amount needed, and that there was a crowd gathering around him, all interested in the food. He also noted the rather worrying looks on the faces of some of the women, so with a quick move, he gathered as much food as he needed, while leaving a number of shadow clones to keep cooking. One woman was still more than he could handle. 2 or worse, more than that. Now that would be difficult. A quick thought brought forth another plan, and another pair of clones took the remaining food while he began summoning a pair of toads to help his plans. If nothing, he should have probably informed them of these events. Being a summoner, he had some duties after all. Still, it had been hard, not to mention painful, to perform any of the jutsu he normally used without problem. Whatever happened in the chamber was a serious issue, and if he had problems performing the simplest of jutsu outside combat, what would happen if he was fighting? Naruto truly hoped that he wouldn't have to find out. When the terms Jiraiya and Field Day come to mind, one usually images him peeping on a bathhouse, or writing his infamous books. Today, however, was far different. He wasn't sure if Naruto had any idea just what he pulled off, but he wasn't looking a gift horse in the mouth. On the outside, nothing had changed, but it was on the inside that the real effects showed. Years of ninja life and his various vices, some by choice, others by need, had taken their toll on his body, as the decades of slow poisoning sapped his strength, speed and flexibility. Heck, he knew that even his bones were more brittle than they once were. Now, a smirk covered his face as he jumped from roof to roof, without having to resort to using chakra. He still felt the weight of his years, but it was considerably lightened. He didn't have to guess, as Tsunade did a quick scan of both their bodies. Whatever Naruto did didn't remove the effects of the years, merely all the negative side effects of their ninja lifestyle. Tsunade was feeling it as well, as the years of alcoholism, lack of physical exercise, and sheer battle damage had damaged many parts of her body, which were now in almost pristine condition. It would be almost like they were raised under complete isolation from all damaging influences, while still having the benefit of a body reinforced by them. The first thing Jiraiya did was get rid of his supply of tobacco. Well, most of it. He kept the small stash of the really high-quality stuff for his old sensei. He certainly didn't want to waste this newfound strength on something so trite. Tsunade had come to a similar decision, dropping her monthly supply of sake to a mere bottle. She too didn't like the idea of losing her strength once more. The others showed far lighter effects. It did help that they were all between 12 and 30, with Kishi and Kushina being the youngest and oldest, respectively. If she had to guess, Kushina was still at her optimal level of strength, while Anko, Shizune and Kishi would see little to no benefit. For once, being old was an advantage. Apart from those that were by cooking for an army, a second squad of Naruto clones were busy in the seal chamber, along with the pair of toads, consisting of Ma and Pa, both rather curious of the events, one group gathering and analyzing the remaining crystals, a second one putting down the effects, appearance, leftover chakra signature, pretty much everything concerning the crystal tank he had created. It was hard, tiring work, as the change affected his every skill, and even the clones had lost some of their mobility along with the usual chakra sensing skills he relied on. But it would be worth it. If such an ability could be developed so to be of use to heal others, the opportunities were endless, and even the elder toads agreed on it, willing to offer some assistance on the research. 1500 hours, Nadra, the Old Ox Tavern, two shadowy figures occupied a table, well distanced from any actual light sources. If anyone bothered to observe them, they would find that beneath the rims of their straw hats they were utterly formless, just a faint glow of eyes surrounded by darkness. However, no one did observe, for this was one of the seedier taverns, in one of the poorer districts, with watered-down drinks, and waiters that could probably gut you as easy as serve you. In places like that, people made their job not to notice such details as someone's face unless it was obvious that they were going to skip pay. If they didn't know, they wouldn't be able to lie once asked, and they lived longer, simple really. But back to the subject at hand, the two figures were whispering with a third one that had just joined them, a servant in his late 30s, and with the exchange of a small bag for a few whispered sentences, the trio parted ways, the servant suddenly at a loss as to why he was there in the first place. 1800 hours, Nadra, estate of Lord Kaisho, guest rooms. A smile graced the face of Kushina Uzumaki as she observed her new family lying down, sleeping. She wasn't much better herself, lying down on the second bed in the room, barely awake. Naruto was still too tired from the after-effects of whatever he did that morning, and Enko was also slightly sleepy from the removal of her cursed seal. The two of them had lain down together by reflex, while Kisi chose to sleep in the comfy recliner she was sitting on. That left her the only one awake, but she didn't really mind much, since she had a lot to think about. Much to her sadness, neither of her children were in of a condition to talk, as Naruto was exhausted by the ritual while Kisi was tired from looking after her for days on end, finally getting a chance to rest up a bit. She reasoned that they would have all the time in the world once they went back home. Besides, the way home was long, and they would certainly camp at a few places along the way. Taking one last look at them, she quietly closed the door of their room and walked out, tracing her steps down the sadly familiar hallways, where she once remembered her older siblings chasing her after hiding their toys, a long time before any of this happened. She made a small smile at the memory of her father chastising her for her unprincess-like behavior, and the skillfully hidden smirk that told her, "Good job." She once more walked past the room that once belonged to her parents, letting a faint trickle of tears fall at the memory of her mother singing her to sleep. This place held a lot of memories, many of them fond, but some of them best left forgotten. Kisi's words had struck a chord. Orochimaru had made a clone for two purposes apparently. The first one was easy to understand, as he wanted access to the vault of the Uzumaki royal family, which could only be entered by an Uzumaki. Blood was insufficient to open the doors, one had to be physically present and order them opened. A shame that she and Jiraiya had already taken the liberty of emptying them all those years ago. The second reason left her dumbfounded though. Why for heaven's sake did Orochimaru want to learn about fatherhood or raising children? Such thoughts were best left to other minds, she mused as she continued her stroll down memory lane. And her path guided her to the old, now disused armory. Since Lord Kaisho didn't need a personal guard stationed in the estate, it was no longer used. However, at least one of the family swords would still be hidden in the sealed recesses of the room. She had given away the song to her son, it was his sword now. She'd make do with what she had available, just like she always did. Naruto, much to his sadness, couldn't sleep. A rather sobering thought reached his mind during the day, as more and more confirmation of his now decimated control came in. True, he had developed a working style of kenjutsu, but it needed chakra to work properly. He had a good mastery of ninjutsu and fuinjutsu, but both needed stable chakra to work. His medical skills were similarly limited only to his usual field skills, which were limited to first aid and his knowledge of herbs and pressure points. The lack of chakra, something he certainly wasn't used to, left him a glaring weakness, one for which he would have to find a way to compensate. An hour's thought brought forth several ideas. Traps, a method of combat he very much favored, was one of them, but you couldn't counter-trap someone who ambushed you. Taijutsu was a close second, but he lacked the sheer amount of training people like Guy and Lee put into their work. He was a seal expert, damn it, and even the seals created by his chakra art were too unstable to use, even if he could, theoretically at least, now visualize even larger and more complex arrays. Annoyingly enough, that only meant that he would have to work twice as hard to get there. He could not afford such a weakness. And he would have to improve his kenjutsu skills to a level where he no longer needed chakra to fight, but merely used it as an added strength. His taijutsu also had glaring holes for anyone above Chunin rank. But there was a third thought that very much brought a wicked smile to his face. Long practice in learning how to heal poisons had left him rather familiar with their effects, and there were more ninja tools than just kunai and shuriken. Senbon needles, a weapon he was particular to, was deadly when used with poison and pinpoint accuracy. It was very curious what the insertion of certain nerve agents to certain points in the body caused, and he only knew about 5 such combinations. He was willing to bet that Enko knew at least a few dozen, and that Orochimaru knew hundreds. Razor-sharp ninja wire, commonly used for traps, was also deadly when combined with seals and/or simple trap mechanisms. And it was quite possible to create trap arrays even with his unstable chakra control. He would just have to improvise a bit. Such a shame I'm so bad at it, he jokingly thought as he stroked Enko's hair, bringing forth an unintelligible sound from her while she nuzzled into his chest. He threw one last look to the sleeping shape of his sister, and with a small grunt of pain, summoned a single clone to cover her with another blanket. With a final sigh and a small yawn, he went to sleep, one hand on a kunai beneath the covers, and a faint smile covering his lips as the clones in the seal chamber dispersed. For the 10th time in the last half an hour, Shizun let out an annoyed sigh. While nowhere near her mentor's level, Shizun liked to gamble occasionally, playing for no more than small change. To her, it was more about keeping her skills fresh than about the adrenaline that the professional players felt. Playing with small amounts meant that it was impossible to reach said levels of risk, and the practice of reading other people's poker faces was good for combat. The guard she was playing with proved to be little challenge, and while she won some and lost some, it held her interest for about half an hour. Now, she was busy preparing the medical equipment Tsunade and she carried everywhere they traveled for the long trip to Konoha. She couldn't call it home anymore, as there was little left for her there. While she was younger, she focused greatly on her training, and much less on making friends. The few she did died in the last war, and with the death of her uncle, she joined her sensei Tsunade when she left Konoha. Now, she was tired and bored, a rather bad combination for any ninja. And she only had another 2 scrolls to go through. Well, at least she still had a bit of her own research to attend to. That part was fun. And Kushina's son seemed to be interesting. It wasn't every day that you see someone pull a stunt like that. Maybe he'd be willing to trade notes on it, because it sure piqued her curiosity. 2300 hours, Konoha, Hyuga clan hold, chambers of the clan head, Hyuga Hayashi. There was a number of reasons why the Hyuga clan was the currently most prestigious clan of Konoha. One of them was the fact that they were the only remaining clan that actually had the numbers to be called so, as most others were 2 or 3 dozen strong at best. A second one would be their rather dangerous and useful bloodline, the White Eye, or Byakugan. A third would be their use of said eye, and the measures that generations of research with direct testing helped to develop. If there was one place in the entire village of Konohagakure that could not be eavesdropped or spied on from the outside, it was the so-called chamber of the clan head, which in appearance was nothing more than a glorified study. Appearances usually deceived, however, as many spies painfully found out moments before their rather gruesome deaths. Members of the Hyuga clan didn't take lightly to spies. Within the chamber were a number of clan heads, all of them actually, joined by several others. Commander Wolf of Anbu, followed by Marino Ibiki, the elder, Hamura Mitokado, Saito Yakushi, the head of the Konoha hospital, and finally Hiruzen Sarutobi, the Hokage. This was, however, fat from a social gathering, regardless of the fact that it was disguised as one, the occasion conveniently being Hayashi's birthday, an event that out of courtesy, very few could avoid. Elder Koharu Yutane was one of those few, and with a very understandable reason, one that had a great deal to do with the purely social gathering here. With his usual regal bearing, Hayashi opened the discussion with a short, but meaningful question. "Is this evidence certain?" he asked in his usual reserved tone, implying nothing more than the question. Ibiki Marino, the man directly responsible for the gathering of said evidence stood, and with a barely visible look to the Hokage, which was answered with an equally visible nod, walked to the center of the gathering, preparing to speak of the information he had gathered during the past month or so. "As you have all been made aware, during the past month, I have gathered information following the lead of a group of 3 root agents, responding directly to Danzo. The scrolls on them contained a sufficient amount of information on Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, Anko Mitarashi, and worryingly enough, Tsunade Senju to form a highly efficient assassination team to counter almost all of their skills, should the countries the scrolls were meant for receive them." A number of gasps followed the statement that Danzo had committed a betrayal of said level. He was known as ambitious and ruthless, but to go as far as to eliminate some of their own stronger to strongest ninja by giving out information to foreign villages? The villages in question were Iwa, Kusa and Kyumo, he added for more effect, waiting a bit before speaking up again. "I have the original scrolls here, along with their deciphered copies. Also, there was one more worrying detail. About 10 years ago, Konoha was riddled with a number of disappearances, notable because they were of children. Of the 50 children that had vanished, I identified 5 as root agents that were captured, and I can safely assume that there are more." An awkward silence descended on the room. While most of them didn't like Danzo, he was always at least believed to be loyal. Considering the information he had at his disposal, he was dangerous. "Danzo has become a threat to us all," Inoichi calmly stated. "Agreed," came from his big-boned friend. "Considering how much he knows, what's to stop him from leaking it to others if we become a threat to his plans?" Murmurs of agreement came from the entire room, while Sarutobi remained perfectly quiet the entire time. With a small smile, he turned to his longtime companion and friend, Hamura. "Do you have anything to add?" he asked in his usual kind voice, a small sliver of entertainment barely slipping through. The smile on Hamura's face was all the answer he needed, but the others should be informed as well. "After we were presented with the evidence, myself and Koharu, under the Hokage's authority, took the liberty of preparing a 2-component poison for Danzo, the first half of which has already been administered by Koharu tonight. The 2 components, while kept apart, are completely inert. However, when combined, they are utterly lethal. She is still in a meeting with him, as the old hawk believes we are willing to spy on the rest of the council for him, so if it is your will, his life can be quickly ended whenever it is necessary by nothing more than a small needle." Hamura added, much to the entertainment of some and the surprise and shock of others. "Does everyone agree that he pay the price of treason?" Hiruzen sternly asked, receiving a number of nods in return. "Good. Now, what do we do with the root division? They are highly loyal Yodanzo, and it might not be possible to remove the effects of years of indoctrination," he added. "Might I offer a suggestion, Hokage-sama?" Inoichi asked. Hiruzen nodded for him to proceed. "There are several experts on brainwashing in my clan, along with several of my colleagues in the INT department who know much on the subject. If nothing else, a group of 5 of us is capable of screening the root members and determining who among them can be, for the lack of a better word, salvaged. A sound plan. Hayashi, would you be willing to lend a few of your family members to help out? Their truth-reading skills would prove invaluable." Hiruzen asked the Hyuga head. "I don't see why not. Konoha has already lost many to the invasion, and the root forces didn't count among them," he shortly stated. "Now that that's settled, on to the next subject. 8 o'clock, Whirlpool Country, the gates of Nadara. Are you sure you can't stay any longer?" Kaisho asked in a half-sad voice. "Sorry old friend, but we really can't," Tsunade sadly returned. "However, I promised to come and visit. I suppose I'll have to settle for that," the older man retorted in a wistful tone, then brightened up as he remembered something. "Here, I almost forgot." He pulled out a small chest. "I believe you and your son and daughter will appreciate these as well, Lady Kushina," he added as he passed it to Tsunade, who opened the lid, revealing a set of 7 sapphire blue medallions, each of them formed in the shape of the whirlpool swirl, the symbol of the former dynasty that ruled the country for generations. "Consider it a gift from a grateful people. They once belonged to your family, and I believe it's time they returned to it. And remember, you will always be welcome here," he added, as he waved them off. A slight smile crossed the old man's lips as the group slowly departed. "Ah, kids these days," he bemusedly thought as they went away. "Jiraiya, have you informed Saratobi Sensei that we are coming?" Tsunade asked her old teammate as they walked along. "Already done. Sensei knows that you've accepted the position," Jiraiya answered. "It should take us a full week if we travel like this." Well, we no longer need to hide. Naruto? Gimme a hand here." His pupil nodded, and they both went through the hand seals for a summoning, bringing forth 2 large armored toads, each easily the size of a house. "Gamma-san, Gamaraku, good to see you again, old friends." "Jiraiya? What are you up to now, old pervert? And more importantly, did you bring cards?" Gamma-san bombarded him with questions, while the other, Gamaraku, shook his head. "Not this time, son, we kinda need a lift to Konoha. Can you help us?" "Sure, just hang on tightly." Gamaraku answered his question with a wide grin, rather reminiscent of the ones Naruto made. Jiraiya suddenly felt that there was a reason to be very worried, while his pupil kept whistling innocently. Praying to whatever god would listen and asking Naruto and Kishi to help Kushina, he joined the others in climbing atop the toads before they went off. Much to Jiraiya's surprise, the journey back proved to be uneventful for a long while. While surprised, Jiraiya had long since learned to both appreciate and fear such times. Appreciate for the short times of peace, and fear for the storm they usually announced. Unlike when they first came here, they no longer needed to hide their presence, although with them breaking the siege at Nadara and the flare of chakra that Naruto released, he doubted there were many in the neighborhood who didn't know they were there. After 8 hours of traveling, even at the great speeds that the toads provided, they all needed a rest, especially Kushina and Naruto. Within moments, a campsite was quickly erected, 3 earthen hovels, entrances facing each other, half buried into the ground, along with a small wall that had snow stacked on all sides to hide it from the outside. Shizune unsealed an amount of firewood, carried safely for such occasions within a scroll. The fortified campsite was ready. In the middle of the borderlands, it was dangerous to stay still for long, for if it didn't attract bandits or rogue ninja, it attracted predators. While a ninja could easily kill a wolf or bear, there were far worse things hiding deep in the bleached white wasteland around them. With the fire going, it was warm enough to sit comfortably on a few blankets they had sealed, and Kushina decided to use the opportunity to talk to her children, pulling them both off to the side along with Anko, who she realized would probably be an in-law soon, while the others resigned themselves to some warm food. Not a bad thing that. I've been wondering for a while now, well, ever since I woke up. Actually, Kushina started, how your lives went during all these years. What I wanted to say, is that I want to get to know you a bit better, and if you're still willing, to give this family a chance, she stated in a calm voice, while inwardly, she was scared. Scared of them refusing her. While every rational part told her that she wasn't to blame for being absent, and indeed, it was a wonder if Kishi would be there if she was, her emotional part was worried, as the mind didn't work on rationality alone, and there was a chance that they would. Said fears were quickly dispersed by a slightly worried smile sent by her son, and one that was a combination of affection and curiosity by her daughter. Anko, for all her boisterous talking before, was feeling as if she were intruding once more, and had begun moving to leave, only to feel 2 hands on her shoulders, one belonging to her lover, and the other to the older Uzumaki. And where do you think you're going? Naruto cheekily asked, attempting to keep a serious face, but a visible quiver of his lip revealed that he was trying not to smile and laugh. Kushina was grinning as well. I thought you said you wanted to meet your future mother-in-law, dear, Kushina calmly stated while still grinning. Well, you're getting your chance. Dragged back down, Anko joined them in laughter. Even if it would take a lot of time for them to get used to each other and become a real family, together, they'd try. It was enough for her, for now at least. Having that lovable hunk as a husband in the foreseeable future wasn't a matter she objected to. So, what did you want to know? Naruto asked, a bit hesitant, but still willing to answer any questions. It would only be fair, he had a lot of questions to ask himself. Everything. Kushina enthusiastically near shouted, ah. Guess I'll start at the beginning then. When Dad died and you were, well, kidnapped I assume, the old man, don't tell me you call Sarutobi old man? Kushina interrupted him, her face threatening to break into a laugh. Not always. Naruto answered, but at times in private, yes. To continue, Sarutobijiji had me placed in an orphanage, mostly because the vast majority of our dear councilmen saw me as the Kyuubi that had attacked them, and went out of their way to have me dead. From there, things went from bad to worse. Naruto continued retelling his tale, omitting no detail he could remember from all of his years, all the few good times and the many bad, finally culminating with the events a few months ago, when his life finally changed for the better. Kushina's eyes steeled at his story, her hand unconsciously gripping the hilt of the sword she had taken, a cold, murderous fury slowly taking hold. How dare they? After all we had done for them to perform such a betrayal. If Naruto hadn't asked her to calm down, promising that there would be a reckoning, and admitting that if it weren't for the small circle of friends that kept him sane, he would have broken a long time ago. The glares she sent in Jiraiya's direction were no less friendly, though he at least had a somewhat reasonable excuse, and if his information was correct, as much as she hated it, it would have been worth it. Tsunade, who had overheard a good part of it, was no better. He once beloved home allowed itself to become that. Kushina might have been swayed by Naruto's words, and his attempts to make peace for his growing family, but she wasn't nearly as favorably inclined. Heads would roll, figuratively and physically. She didn't hold malice against her sensei. Sarutobi sensei was old, and had lost much of the strength he once held. It was to be expected, but from what she heard from Jiraiya, his mind had recently once more become a razor-sharp edge that brought far more fear than any of his ninja skills. During the Second Shinobi War, it were his stratagems and tactics that outmaneuvered, outsmarted and finally utterly defeated a then numerically superior Cloud/Rock alliance, but the loss of so many of his family during the ending of the Third War, and later in the Kyuubi attack dulled many of his skills, including some of his intellect. And to make matters worse, while he was now bound by the laws and duties of a Hokage, his probably greatest rival to the position had no such qualms. Sticking a nearly broken old man into such a position and then blaming him when he couldn't do as good as he once did would be cruel. Well, I guess it's my turn now, Kishi shortly commented, still slightly disgusted by the behavior of the people of Konoha, whom she remembered that, and her father? Maybe? Orochimaru had a very low opinion of. As I've already told you, Orochimaru created me 12 years ago, by separating a half of my mother's soul from her and forming a body around it. After that, I was raised with him on the go, until he founded Otogakure some 6 years ago, the first of its bases being located within a canyon in the rice field country. It was unique, I suppose, growing up with Orochimaru as your father. He was gentle and caring, always making sure I was safe. From when he founded the village, he showed your body to me, and proceeded to train me as a ninja. She chuckled slightly at the idea. He told me you were poisoned, and that he had to keep you in stasis until he could find a way to cure you. Kushina, she added, bringing a barely visible twitch to the woman's fingers. Anyway, he trained me all right, as ruthlessly as he could without killing me, stopping always just a small distance from killing me, always giving a warm smile as he told me how much I had improved. Naruto found it strange to listen to about the man he had known to be a veritable monster act like a caring father. Even if he did lie quite a bit, he had apparently taken good care of her for many years. He also kept me strangely well informed about his plans, often talking to me about ideas concerning long-term strategies, though I figured out later that most of those were either already completed or in progress, the questions being solely for me to develop an analytical mind. He took good care of me. I even have with me a gift he gave me for my 10th birthday, she told, lifting a small scroll and unsealing a rather unique weapon. It consisted of a central ring, to which were attached 2 long chains, each of the links past the first dozen or so having a blade, with the final ones being large, bladed crescents. The entire weapon was forged from red steel, a rather expensive alloy of iron usually made by blacksmiths from rock, but rarely used their sign. It was good at channeling fire chakra, an affinity rarely present there. He also taught me how to use it, she added, a somber look now crossing her face. Life was beautiful until about a year ago when I accidentally entered an interrogation session that made my stomach churn. He had already explained it to me, but it still caught me by surprise, and nearly made me puke. He broke it off for the moment and brought me back to his office to calm me down, leaving me with a scroll to work on after he did. Then I noticed his journal. Curious, I began to read, skipping through pages until I found his entries around the day I was born. A single tear went down her eyes. It was heartbreaking to learn just what my father had done in order to create me, but a part of me still loves the kind man he was to me. So I did what I could, acted like I haven't read anything, playing the shock off with the aftereffects of the sighting of the interrogation, and escaped with mother's body at the first opportunity, taking what I could in the process. Fortunately, Orochimaru took the time to teach me a few different clone jutsu, and that was a serious help in getting you out, she explained, pointing at her mother. You know, I always looked up to you, wondering what you were like when I watched your body in stasis, cursing the bastard who poisoned you. Kisi sighed. While I was running away to the northwest, I came across the city of Nadara, and straight into the leader, Lord Kaisho. The kind old man recognized Kushina and offered me, and by extension her, shelter, while he called Tsunade. The rest you know, she finished, idly twiddling her thumbs as she leaned onto her new brother, who merely helped her settle comfortably throughout the entire time. Enko was doing the same, all the time plotting to do something for Naruto to make it up to him for everything he's done for her, also listening. She was about to go next, until she noticed that Jiraiya had tensed up. Jiraiya had spent his time thinking how to help Naruto prepare even better for the oncoming attack by the Akatsuki. With very limited information on the organization, which was even more limited when it came to their membership, it was impossible to plan for specific enemies, rather forcing him to train Naruto for every eventuality, something he was afraid he wouldn't be able to do, without sending him into the middle of a war. Still, anticipation of battles to come would have to wait, as he had a few more annoying problems presently, the rising headache that was his second apprentice. The boy was always in trouble, but this time he couldn't rightfully complain. One does not look a gift horse in the mouth, so to speak. But he also couldn't shake the feeling that they were being followed, so he did what made most sense, created a shadow clone with very little chakra and ordered him to lie in wait. An hour later, the feeling still wasn't gone, but the clone didn't notice anything. He now had reason to be worried. Instincts developed over years of war, and sleeping with one eye open, something that could go as far as being called a danger sense, were never mistaken. If they were, he'd be long since dead, as contrary to the rumors, some of which he himself planted through his extensive spy network, he was hardly invincible, and had more brushes with death than he cared to count. A kunai through one's head is quite lethal regardless of your skill. Tsunade, go for stealth and proceed, he quietly ordered in a voice that left no room for argument. Naruto, as much as I hate it, the two of us are staying behind to bait them. Kushina, Anko, Kisi, Shizun, help provide a secure passage for Tsunade. We'll meet you back home. Gamison, take good care of them, and I'll get you a full barrel. He finished his orders, and all quietly nodded, before proceeding to their tasks, not once questioning his orders. Few did, unless he was joking around, and now wasn't one of those times. Within seconds, Tsunade, Shizune and Enko, under Tsunade's advice, had changed from their previous appearance into three young men with features greatly differing from their original ones. Kushina and Kisi soon joined them, and after the three of them gave one last parting kiss or hug, a bit to Naruto's embarrassment when Enko kissed him full on the mouth, the two groups parted. "How's your chakra?" Jiraiya asked, not once moving his eyes from the direction he was expecting an attack, all the while going through the few hand seals necessary to destroy their campsite. "It still hurts to mold it, but I can control it easily." "Why? Can you still do what you did during the preliminaries with your skill, and aim it in that direction?" he asked once more. "Done," Naruto answered with a slight wince. It was nowhere near as easy as it used to be, but to his surprise, the image he got back was far clearer than he was used to. He made a mental note to test it once he had the time. Still, it was relatively easy to sense the two figures that were following them, even if they were trying to hide. The pain that followed it was an annoying addition, but he could handle it. Two figures moving at high speed with suppressed signatures. No visible weapons on the first one, nor on the second one, though I can sense the faint forms of a set of scrolls, most likely. Storage on one of them. "They are 5 minutes away at their present speed," Naruto quickly reported to a serious Jiraiya. "Cloaks and hats?" "Cloaks and hats, well, they certainly don't waste time. No time to set any usable traps on my account." "Yours?" the older Toad summoner asked. "A few. I have enough time for them right now." "A show of force, I assume?" Naruto answered, ignoring the sting of pain from summoning a dozen clones, and pulled out a scroll, unsealing 5 small bottles. "Now this will be of use," he murmured as he pulled out a number of senbon, passing the job among the clones with him, while the remaining 8 began setting up traps, going from the strongest ones and layering sets of weaker ones over them. He was deeply thankful that his skills hadn't rusted any, and, probably thanks to the boost that Kyuubi set him up with, he found that making such plans was easy. 5 traps, each with 4 layers sequentially firing off against whatever target came in, and all of them delayed by just enough to make them unpredictable. 5 additional clones hidden beneath the earth with well-suppressed signatures, and armed with senbon laced with paralyzing, tissue-dissolving and fast-acting laxative, yes, you read properly, poisons, ready to strike at a moment's notice. The original stood with a pair of his seal kunai, blades extended by his wind chakra, a small bag of chakra and blood pills within reach, and a number of special kunai ready to explode attached to the inner sides of his coat. 2 sets of his Triune Hunter scrolls, along with 2 others, were attached to his belt. Next to him was Jiraiya, with a single kunai loaned to him by Naruto, having summoned 3 more toads that took to hiding out of sight, in wait for a proper moment to strike. "It is. I think mist would be a fine addition, don't you?" he offhandedly commented, while Naruto proceeded to summon a fine mist which was saturated with just enough chakra to throw off their sensing skills a little. Every edge was valuable now. The idea brought a smile to Naruto's face, and he pulled out another scroll from the holder stitched into the back of his coat. He threw it to Jiraiya, who instantly caught it, and recognizing the storage seal, went to unseal it. "Exploding tags? You do know that those aren't going to stop or kill them," Jiraiya noted, while inwardly, he got the idea, but was curious as to how Naruto would argument it. "The stack easily had 200 tags, 1 won't. 10 won't. But 100 are sure to make their lives at least a bit harder," Naruto flatly stated while he pulled out his own stack, ignored sting of pain from summoning another group of 5 clones, and handed the tags over, ordering them to hide. "Any other tricks left?" "Nope, can't think of anything else." "And now we wait," Naruto idly noted, with his sensei absently nodding. Kushina was worried. That came normally as a mother, but now she was worried more than normal, since she left behind her son to face Kami knew what, something that she for certain didn't like. But as much as she wanted to help him, even with all the healing, she was only good for traveling, and would most likely hamper more than help. She had been a ninja for far too long not to understand such things. "Don't worry, he's going to be okay," Enko reassuringly stated, though whether it was to reassure herself or Kushina was open for discussion. "How can you be so sure?" "I trust him. And I believe in him. I know he'll return for me, and for the rest of his family," she solemnly stated, then a smirk crossed her lips. "And heaven help those that stand in his way," she added, while Kushina shook her head in defeat. She might as well have argued with a stone wall, the effects were the same. Tsunade had already set her plan into motion, as she dismissed the giant toad. For the boost in speed it gave them, it also made following them child's play, a luxury that they at the moment didn't have. All of them were hinged into men, between ages of 15 and 20, faces covered with cloth masks leaving only the tops of their faces visible. Each and every member of the group, including, or perhaps especially Kisi, had years of experience behind them, so such a feat was rather easy for them. They were back in the borderlands between the whirlpool and fire countries, and it was an area best traversed quickly. The open lowlands, riddled with small hills and forests, were an ideal place for an ambush, and the rather thick forest Jiraiya chose for his was even better than average, leaving just enough room to maneuver. A standard tactic, but it worked well in the past, and she could only wonder what his pupil would do. Naruto was slightly nervous about the encounter that was about to take place, so he went through a quick mental calculation. He had next to no information on his enemy. Bad. He pulled off every single thing that could increase his chances, without revealing too much of his skills. Good. He couldn't properly mold large amounts of chakra. Bad. But that didn't stop him from using the chakra already present in him and around him, leaving his radiance forms in the game. Good. The enemy was likely a pair shranked Akatsuki ninjas, out for his blood, meaning that they'd do everything in their power to separate them, and take him down alone, which would probably be easy for them. Very, very bad. Well shit. So much for that thing going well. Still, I have Jiraiya on my side, that counts for something. I hope. The two figures finally arrived at the position within the forest where Naruto and Jiraiya stood. Naruto focused the field on the two of them, foregoing any of the usual nonsense that applied to social situations, and scanning them down to their skin. The two figures were imposing, both completely covered by the black and red cloaks that were actually very visible against the snow, and a pair of straw hats covered their faces, while the cloaks distorted the shapes of their bodies sufficiently to make it near impossible to recognize. No weapons nor tools visible. The chakra signature that signified a living being present was almost completely absent, weaker than that of a civilian. Yet the speed at which they moved, the fact that they easily evaded Jiraiya's surveillance and the position where they stopped, just outside the triggering range of all but the best concealed layer of traps, told far more than their appearances. They stood perfectly still, not a single motion to reveal any plan. The only sign they were alive was the small amount of misted breath coming out of the shapeless forms that were their faces, and a pair of barely visible eyes gleaming in the darkness. "Will you come peacefully?" came the voice of the left one, a raspy, distorted voice. Changed voice. Naruto and Jiraiya simultaneously thought. Naruto stalled for time for a few seconds, trying to give Jiraiya and himself a few more moments to think. "No," he finally answered. All hell broke loose. Almost faster than he could react, the left one, 9 from this point until his identity is revealed, dropped his hands to the snow beneath him and a large mud wall rose from the ground, attempting to separate Naruto and Jiraiya. At the same time, the right one, 10, likewise, came at Naruto at great speed. Invisible to Naruto, Jiraiya quickly formed the Rasengan in his right hand, slamming it into the wall and obliterating it, while at the same time his few clones began an attack on 9, throwing the full amount of exploding tags, numbering over 100 at him, planning to corral him towards his associate. Naruto's clones had already sprung into action, but over 3/4 of those armed with tags were cut down immediately via a kunai wielded by 10. He had less than a second to see the hand move out from beneath the cloak and cut them to shreds. The clones armed with poison Senbon chose that exact moment to attack, aided by the field of radiance present, which made the smoke cloud created by the dispelling of the clones as easy to see through as clear glass. 9 ignored the situation 10 was in, and proceeded to attack Jiraiya, going for the position between him and Naruto. Just as he got close, one of the 3 clones of Jiraiya began spitting out a rain of fireballs while a second slammed his hands into the ground, forcing a wall of earth to block him off. 9 rebounded on the wall, running up and jumping off, using the jump time and acquired height to bombard Jiraiya with a rain of shuriken and kunai. Jiraiya didn't have to guess that some of them, if not all, would be poisoned and instantly sank into the ground, leaving the now 2 surviving clones behind and going for Naruto. The 2 clones sent a quick breath of fire at 9, whose body melted away into water and evaporated in the flames. Naruto smirked beneath his white mask as the tags simultaneously exploded, but was ready as he knew that the explosion, even if it obliterated everything at its center, wouldn't be enough. A single clone had managed to land an envenomed Senbon into Ten's leg, but in the rush of memories, he found it hard to tell which poison mixture was it. Kyubi thankfully was and quickly informed him, muscle relaxant, it should buy you a moment or two. The thought made its way to his mind, causing an immediate shift in plans. With a quick move the 2 kunai in his hand flew, primed to explode on contact, while he jumped back, preparing the Triune Hunter's set, a single scroll kunai already jabbed into the ground. 9 instantly joined the fray by jumping over the broken ruins of the wall destroyed by Jiraiya a mere few moments ago, and immediately flashing through a short sequence of hand seals, unleashing a hailstorm on needles from the darkness beneath his hat. Naruto inwardly cursed as he sensed 10 moving to intercept him at the place he originally planned to jump to avoid the needles, so in turn, he jumped away, to the left, holding to the remaining part of the earthen wall, all the while going through the hand seals to activate the scrolls. 10 once more charged at him, a pair of kunai materializing in his hands as they rose from beneath the cloak, each covered by a crackling energy that he easily identified as lightning. Secret art, Triune Hunters, Naruto shouted as the 3 foxes took form. He managed to pull of the jutsu without as much as a flinch, but it would likely be his last one that way. A short last pulse unsealed Quicksilver from his right palm, just in time to snap the 2 kunai out of Ten's hands by using the holes on the side of the sword, while the Fire and Wind Fox immediately went on the offensive. The Earth Fox had already charged at him. Much to Naruto's disappointment, the Earth Fox was obliterated by a strong fire jutsu created by a now-present 9, and he realized that Jiraiya was nowhere in sight. Beneath me then, Naruto quickly figured out as the 2 remaining foxes crashed into 10, shredding the cloak and hat, but leaving no visible wounds to the person beneath them and fizzling out afterward. So the cloaks protect them. Damn, Naruto inwardly cursed. The figure was still imposing though, even if the cloak and hat no longer distorted his shape. He certainly didn't know who it was, but the black hair, face covered with a spiraling orange mask with a single hole over the left eye and simple black clothes beneath were easy to memorize. A dry chuckle escaped the man, and it sounded. He didn't have a word for it. It was like a sound you'd expect from a tomb door that was undisturbed for centuries opening, along with all the unpleasant connotations the image brought forth. However, there was one further detail that would be burned in his memory, when in that single hole in the mask he recognized a fully developed, 3-demo Sharingan, leaving him with no more than a moment before it changed shape. Somewhere from the back of his mind he pulled out the only other battle that had a strong Sharingan user in it he could remember. Kakashi vs. Sabuza. Sharingan has the ability to read movements to the level of a moment's precognition through surface chakra usage, along with mild hypnotic powers through eye contact. He consulted what he could remember of the bloodline, so, if the basic one had all that, this one is probably even worse. Not to mention that the abilities are likely enhanced. Okay, I can't stop him from reading my movements without my compression form, but I can stop him from directly messing with my mind. The mental effort crammed into less than a second gave a result, and before his enemy could affect him, he shut his eyes. They would have widened if he didn't, as he felt a massive chakra buildup now clearly visible to his radiance vision, along with a second figure, which he identified as 9 doing pretty much the same. All plans he could make went to pieces when he felt a third figure rising from the ground, almost fully concealed by the buildup the 3 of them had produced. Calculating that Jiraiya would rise just beneath or behind 10, he forced a shunshin, the pain finally beginning to rack his body, and moved a few meters behind 9, who had already anticipated that move and was turned to face him. 9, however, wasn't going to wait for Naruto to do what he had in mind. Before he could react, 5 kunai were launched at Naruto, forcing him to either block or dodge, as 9 flashed through a set of single-handed seals and raised a single index finger, pointed at Naruto. Lightning release. False darkness, he spoke, as a arc of lightning extended towards Naruto, only to slam into an instantly erected barrier just inches away from the boy's face. Fine. You asked for it, Naruto stated in a pissed-off voice. Radiance. Compression, he intoned in a flat voice as the entire field of radiance focused around his body, slowly forming into the somewhat demonic-looking armor of crystalline chakra, no longer the pure, vivid blue, but a far darker one, like an ocean in a storm. Jiraiya took advantage of the distraction that Naruto's form changing provided to unleash a strong earth attack on the unmasked 10, who jumped, only to be struck from all sides by earthen spikes that grew out of the ground, stretching like tentacles to stab him. Jiraiya cursed when he realized that there was a log in the middle of the spikes rather than a bloodied corpse, though he noted a few traces of blood. So it did land a hit. Right behind him, 10 focused his gathered chakra into a single strong jutsu, fire release, demonic bloom. The masked man spoke, sending a single highly compressed sphere of fire at him. Jiraiya had less than a second to use substitution and shunshin in succession to move from the range of the jutsu he, much to his horror, recognized. The sphere detonated, blazing into a wide flare around it, incinerating everything, and sending out 8 smaller spheres in random directions. Jiraiya realized that they succeeded in their original plan, as they simultaneously forced Naruto and Jiraiya to move in opposite directions, and now they could attack Naruto without his interference. He quietly prayed that Naruto would hold out until he could come and support him. Completely unfazed by the explosions, Naruto stood, his glowing blue eyes staring into number 10's barely visible ones as a hand grasped the handle of the rippling blade of quicksilver, 9 chakra tails flailing behind him, each waiting for the other to move first. A cold, emotionless look graced Naruto's features, and a state of body and mind that only waited for the smallest of movements from his opponent before it reacted held him ready. Surprisingly, it was 10 who reacted first, a simple, gray ninjato appearing in his outstretched hand as he moved at great speed to stab Naruto through the gut, the blow quickly parried and countered by half a dozen chakra tails instantly going for critical areas. If the formless face could show fear, Naruto was quite certain that it would have, but for now he'd have to settle with a light flicker of the eyes as his wind chakra surrounded the surface of the blade. The tails weren't going to kill, but to restrict. One of the tails went around the hand that held the scythe, the other 5 restraining his arms and legs. A final one went around the man's neck, each of them squeezing tightly. Dance of ruin, he cried out as the blade shredded its way through the simple sword and impacting into the cloak. 100. 200. Naruto cried as the blade cut its way through 10's defenses, striking 2 blows, one after another, the first shredding the blade and cloak, and the second landing clear on 10's chest, and as he leaped over him, his back, ripping away the clothes and leaving a number of bleeding wounds on the flesh. Naruto wisely decided to keep quiet about the other blows, deciding to inwardly count the blows and push as much strength as he could from the radiance field into the final one. Before he could land a third blow, the victim began chuckling. Well, that was a weak fucking love tap. Are you a little girl or something? 10 muttered in an annoyed voice. Oi bastard, he shouted to his partner, no point in hiding anymore. I'm cutting the little shit into mincemeat, he announced. And you can pick up the pieces for the damn bijou for all I care. Naruto finally noticed the appearance of the man in front of him. Gray hair bound into a small ponytail, a bare, muscled chest, and standard dark shinobi pants. A pair of red eyes watched him, filled with psychotic glee as he proceeded, at lightning speed no less, to substitute himself with a large log, and to unseal a weapon conveniently located on his belt. It didn't help Naruto's morale that the weapon was a fierce-looking tree-bladed scythe. "Now you little shit-stain." Hayden turned to Naruto, not in the least worried about a blade that was now sticking through his chest. "And bleeding heavily, I'm gonna carve you up so badly not even the Shinigami will be able to sort you out. Let's face it. Naruto has been dealt the short end of the stick most of his life, so he was pretty used to weird stuff going his way. Heck, almost every mission above rank turned into either an A or S rank so far, so being in over his head was nothing new to him. Enemies that did things that made no sense weren't either. But a guy who took a chakra-charged sword into his chest without blinking? That was a new one. Still, if it was alive, it could die as well. His mind went over all the entries he memorized from the bingo books, but was unable to find him there. In the meantime, Ten took his first swing, and Naruto found out just why this guy was in the Akatsuki 9. Found himself unpleasantly surprised by a quickly arriving Jiraiya, who should have been far away enough for him to get to Naruto and disable him. Jiraiya however was now angry, and it took a lot to piss off the old Sannin. His figure was hunched slightly, but he wasn't wounded. Much to Nine's horror, he figured out that the Sannin was aiming. That realization came too late however, as a stream of oil, spit out by a toad beyond his line of sight covered his body. He had lowered his guard for just a split second and the old toad took advantage of it. In a last-ditch effort, Nine pulled on all of his chakra, managing to substitute out of the way 10. "You freaking idiot, get the hell out of there or even your immortality won't save you," he shouted at his partner. He offered a final warning before he vanished. Jiraiya had no intentions of following. It was pointless, as without Naruto's radiance or a tracker Nin it was near impossible to follow them, though he had a very good idea where he was going, and besides, he finally recognized number 10 of the Akatsuki, Hayden the Immortal. The information on him was limited at best, but it stated that he was a former ninja of a small village to the northeast, a devout of Jashin, one of the old demons who built cults and offered their followers powers in return for services. Jashin, unfortunately, was an entity that fed on death and murder, and so did his followers apparently, if Hayden was any indication. Nine wasn't nearly as fortunate as he had hoped. The Shunshin escape led him into what turned out to be a perfectly deadly trap for one such as he, a large seal array carved into the ground, one that restricted any attempts at jutsu such as Shunshin, and, it's a high-speed technique, therefore messed up by it, by drastically increasing the air density within a localized space. It also made such ordinary things as breathing very, very hard. And the friendly array of exploding tags placed everywhere around him made him feel even more welcome. "Just great, what's next?" he grumbled as the tags primed themselves and began exploding. The newly identified Hayden was livid. How dare that little shit boss him around? If he wasn't stuck in a life or death battle with Naruto Uzumaki, he'd kill the little prick. Leaving all such entertaining thoughts and plans for a suitable time later, he once more fully focused on obliterating his enemy. Unlike most others in his illustrious organization, he was a weapon expert, greatly assisted by his apparent immortality. Ninjutsu, while present, was still a distant second. Seals? Genjutsu? Not his style. So he did what he did best, swung around the scythe like a whirlwind of blades. The first attack he made on his enemy, not really waiting for him to pull out his blade from his chest, had surprised him. Naruto proved to be a better fighter than he expected, as he easily dodged the fast slash that would have decapitated the boy, had it connected. The second, following a split second later, was aimed diagonally across his torso, but was blocked by a tail of all things, and countered by another of those pesky chakra-enhanced blows, this one aimed just next to the last one, extending the hole in his chest. Did the boy actually plan to cut him in half? And if he only had more time to play. Naruto's breathing was far quicker than when the battle began. Although he could still maintain his compression form, it had taken a lot of damage from that damnable scythe. Overflow was no longer an option, thanks to his chakra molding issues, and the third form wasn't developed enough yet. So that left only one choice if he wanted to win, and he had to do it fast, if whatever the man he knew as Ten was doing was any indication. "That's a seal he's making," he inwardly commented, noting the seal on the ground that he was making with his scythe. "A seal against a budding seal master is not a good idea, you undying freak," Naruto added, rather happy on the inside, because now, he had not just a plan, but the plan. The problem was, if it failed, he was screwed, but then again, he was screwed if he didn't do something. The fatigue from blocking and dodging the attacks was building up, and very unpleasantly stacking with the dull pain that his aching chakra pathways were giving off. So, it was do or die. What else was new? "Ready to die, little shit?" Haiden jokingly asked, while Naruto's face showed an unnatural calm. "I asked you a question, asshole. Are you gonna reply or am I going to?" he spoke, but was cut off by a sharp voice. "Dance of Ruin," Naruto intoned. It was time. Pulling on all of his remaining chakra, he summoned 8 more clones, all of them together forming a perfect circle around Haiden. Before the immortal could get a chance to react, Naruto cut the move short, flooding him with inhuman amounts of killing intent, and to his own surprise, stunning him for half a moment. Judgment, he finished, 9 swords slashing down to kill the man, all 9 striking. Haiden laughed like a madman, and Naruto soon figured out why as he felt a sharp pain in his left arm, and noticed that 2 out of the 3 blades on Haiden's scythe were lodged in his forearm, which was bleeding profusely. The form of the compression around him was quickly dissipating. He was wounded, exhausted, and almost out of chakra. He didn't want to ask what else could go wrong, but there was still one final phase to pull off. Haiden smirked as he pulled out the blade from Naruto's arm, bringing the bloodied blade close to his lips, completely unaware that Naruto was planning to attack him at that very moment. Just as his body began changing, his skin turning black, and bone-like markings became visible on his skin, but before the blood could take effect, the seal beneath him was covered by something. A very large array, which at the same time was very simple, an oversized exploding tag. In the final moments before the tag destroyed him, a shadow appeared and whisked his body away from the explosion, leaving the brunt of the shockwave to slam into Naruto. It was at that time that the blonde found out that his usual regenerative mechanisms had taken an extended leave of absence. He groaned as he fell to the scorched ground beneath him, getting caught just before hitting it with his head. "Good timing, sensei," he muttered, barely capable of staying awake. "Try and stay conscious. I am already going to get mauled by that girl of yours, and I'm betting that your mother and Kisi, and very likely Tsunade will join in," he jokingly stated as he checked the boy's wounds, slightly frowning when he noticed the deep wound on his arm that was slowly healing. He applied a small bit of chakra to staunch the bleeding and ripping off a piece of his cloak to tie it up. "Need me to bail your ass, Ero-sensei?" "Sure," Naruto jokingly replied to the older man, who laughed and shook his head at his crazy apprentice. "Now that that's settled, off to a glorious death." Jiraiya mused as he jumped forward, towards the rest of their group, holding Naruto over his shoulders, the boy laughing with him, albeit weakly. 2 hours later found the entire group within the borders of Fire Country, within the safety of one of the villages near the border, or more accurately, within a group of 3 rooms in the local inn, with Tsunade doing her best to treat Naruto's many wounds, while Anko, Kisi and Kushina were looking from a small distance. She could safely say that the experience of treating someone for burned pathways was new to her, since most such victims were dead by the time medics got to them. Thin, red and blackish lines designated the points where his chakra had burned his body, mostly present on his arms, torso and legs. He was completely out. A slight chakra-enhanced tap to his neck left him in a dreamless slumber while she and Shizune worked on high healing. Just what did he do, Jiraiya? It looks like he forced all of his chakra through his body at once. I'm not exactly sure. I noticed he had some problem though. When I asked him, he said that he had problems molding chakra, rather than controlling it. Jiraiya calmly answered her question. You have probably noticed the barely concealed winces he made whenever he performed a jutsu, he added, with Tsunade making a short nod, as she put the information together. Finally, she looked at the wound on his arm, treating it with even more medical chakra, and helping the cleansing and regeneration of the wound. Medical techniques, apart from a few forbidden arts, were unable to regenerate flesh to the point of restoring a gaping hole in someone's body, but with people who did regenerate, it was relatively easy to help the body out. It was also at that point that she identified the culprit of the damage to his chakra pathways. From the outside, it was nearly impossible to detect it, but her diagnostic jutsu quickly picked up the residual demonic reiki in Naruto's chakra. When was the last time he used its chakra? Tsunade fired away, months ago. Since then, he relied solely on his own. Jiraiya answered, while Anko nodded in confirmation. Why are you asking? Because Naruto has some leaking into his body. It's a small amount from what I can tell, but it's harming him. Taking into account his regenerative abilities, I doubt it will kill him, but I'd suggest that he avoids using too much chakra for a while. A month at least. Tsunade laid out her diagnosis. It wasn't a pleasant detail, but still, she avoided noting that his chakra was slightly more powerful than before, and if Jiraiya noticed any important changes, he would have said something about it. She finished bandaging the surface wounds on his body and, that's a relief, Kisi softly spoke, while Anko next to her lovingly gazed on him. Come on girls, let's get the troublemaker to bed, Kushina said, relief obvious in her voice as she carefully lifted her son, carrying him off to the bed reserved for him. I think we should all get some rest for now, Jiraiya calmly spoke. We'll be moving again in the morning. I'll take first guard. Midnight, village of Mokaru, Borderlands. The two figures, belonging to Akatsuki members 9 and 10, stood atop the roof of the ruined temple. The temple itself had little significance to either of them, belonging to some long-forgotten cult or religion, but it was useful because it was high up, and ideal for such actions as sending and receiving messenger birds. 9 gently grasped the small bird that came to pick up their reports, gently stroking the bird's head as 10 tied up the two halves of their report to the bird's leg. They were good, 9 calmly stated. Agreed. Next time we pick the battlefield, 10 added. An evening 2 days later, streets of Konoha. It was a beautiful night, Naruto decided. Even if the chilly winter air unpleasantly bit at his skin, he enjoyed it. He had chosen to spend this night alone, as he needed to sort his thoughts, so he left his family behind in the Namikaze estate, safe, knowing that the ward set up by his late father would keep them completely safe. It was not that he doubted their skills, far from it, but he preferred that any intruders don't even get a chance to attack them. He tiredly glanced at his left arm. The wound he received still hadn't healed properly, and both Tsunade and Anko had forbidden him from any physical exertions. Still, the sadistic grin Jiraiya made on the subject of his continued training made him reconsider the idea that taking a few days off was such a bad thing. Recent events outside of his control brought many thoughts and fears, some of which he had thought he had buried for good. The battle he had just fought highlighted all the ups and downs of his current situation and skill. If it wasn't for Jiraiya's instincts, they would have likely been caught off guard and summarily defeated. His own senses, on which he had begun to rely immensely, proved worthless in detecting a threat, which according to his sensei was likely following them from the moment they left Nadara. His traps, while ingenious, failed to stop them for a moment. His sword skills proved to be insufficient to end the enemy's lives, though here he had the issue of figuring out just how to kill an enemy who could stand having a sword stuck through his chest. And if such a useful ability could be replicated, his ninjutsu was non-existent apart from a few minor tricks. His knowledge of poisons bought him a few seconds at best, as the enemy knew how to neutralize them almost immediately. He failed to use the advantages of his chakra art until the end, though if that shadow, whoever it was, didn't save his opponent, he would most certainly be in pieces, immortal or not. The amount of chakra he laced that exploding seal with would have blown a hole through steel. The other highlights were his speed, reflexes, strength and stamina. While the scythe-wielding Psycho and his obviously Uchiha buddy had more skill, he was faster, stronger and more enduring. Apart from the blow that the scythe dealt to his arm, he hadn't been struck once during the entire fight, neither had they, but he could safely assume that this was the case in most higher-level fights amongst ninjas, as all blows were killing ones, which, he could safely argue was a good thing. He could easily point out what he lacked. While he possessed a strong arsenal of low and mid-level skills, with the exceptions of chakra art and swamp of the underworld, which he now realized he hadn't used almost at all, but it took a long time to execute properly, he needed a shortcut. He had no high-end heavy hitters. His sword techniques would cut slack there, but they were mostly too slow to execute properly without a good deal of preparation. So, he made a plan. A big plan, and a damn good one, or at least that's what Naruto thought. If he had to guess, he would say that the Akatsuki will fall like a plague of locusts on the Jinchuriki, and in the cases of those such as him, they would also strike all those close to them in an effort to defeat them, or even worse, force a surrender through hostages. The plan was simple. In essence, he would train his ass off, and while he was doing so, he would help train those closest to him. Also, helping Konoha improve their security, helping out the other members of the rookie 9+ guys team. The added idea of offering to teach the basics of the art of seals in the academy might also be useful. If the younger generation gained an additional edge, it would help greatly, and while things such as self-made exploding tags and sealing scrolls seemed simple to veteran ninjas, for any genin to be able to make those for near no investment on his part helped out substantially. Said money could then be used to buy better equipment, more chakra and blood pills, and so on. Additional help in any area of studies would also be a good idea. He idly wondered how he would fare as a teacher, and if he would end up working with Irika. An interesting idea that. If Jiraiya was already planning a training schedule for him, he had to talk to him and add a few things, such as making the idea of apprenticing Anko real. A fair analysis of her talents and potential showed that she could damn well be one of the best, with proper help. Help he would gladly provide in any way possible. Kushina and Kisi were also on said list. Kushina Uzumaki was regarded as a tactical and strategic nightmare among her many enemies, so he was rather curious how said enemies would react to the two of them. He would also help out another young prodigy, Kabuto. If Tsunade was willing to teach him, he had a sneaky suspicion that he could easily become the best medic Konoha ever produced, and he doubted that with the same help, Sakura would be far behind. He had little doubt that Kakashi was helping Sakura and Sasuke with their training during the time he was absent, but the one-eyed Jounin was better suited to training Sasuke than either Sakura or him, so it would have probably been wise to pair the two of them for a while. He also had reasons to doubt that the others were simply lazing about, well, maybe Shikamaru, but still. But on his own skills, there was a lot to work on. A short chat with Shizun revealed a few very useful ideas. And rechecking his memories, he remembered a few tricks he had seen, so his plan finally took a direction. He would become truly unpredictable, develop a fighting style that had so many facets to it that it would be impossible to prepare against them all. Know thy enemy, but don't let him know you, and prepare such a chain of contingencies that any attempt to bypass them all will prove fatal. Contingencies? How the hell didn't I think of this sooner? Naruto almost shouted, as a completely wicked thought crossed his mind. Oh, he was so going to have fun if it worked. Naruto, however, wasn't the only person out that night. On the opposite side of the village, within the confines of Training Ground 25 to be more exact, all of the members of the former Team 9 along with Team 8, were hard at training. Niji, regardless of becoming a Chunin, had absolutely no qualms about training with his teammates, having been enlightened on the shortcomings of his family's style, or shortly put, he got his ass handed to him by Naruto, something that while it annoyed him, he appreciated, for it would help him grow stronger as he now had perspective. Guy was pleased at how his students were faring. Ever since the exams, Lee had nearly doubled the daily training he normally did, setting a new goal of breaking a steel plate with a palm thrust. As insane as it sounded, he, from personal experience, knew that it could be done, and a shiver went up his spine at the memory of his one-time sensei who was perfectly capable of doing the same. At the same time, Niji and Tenten had taken to perfecting their styles, and learning ninjutsu to incorporate in it. Unsurprisingly, Niji had an affinity for water jutsu, which could easily be added to his already present skills, while Tenten had a strong affinity for earth, the few offensive and many defensive jutsu helping her out greatly. Still, her low chakra capacity was a problem, one he had helped her start to correct. Right next to him, Kurenai Yuhi was observing her own students. Kiba and Akamaru, who were at the time sparring with Lee, had both grown considerably stronger and faster during the past half a month from the exams, mastering almost every one of their clan's jutsu. Still, the great surprise wasn't either Kiba or Shino, it was in fact Hinata. With the growing support of her slightly older cousin and her team, she had not only left her shell, but turned into a deadly, if not a bit inexperienced kunoichi. Even the clan elders of the Hyuga had to begrudgingly admit that she not only had potential, but was quickly becoming a contender for the unofficial position of Hyuga prodigy, and worse still, that they were wrong about her, something that actually brought a grin to Hayashi's face, an act that was followed by many attempts at releasing a genjutsu, which all miserably failed, though more than a few went to consult Mato Guy on unbreakable genjutsu. Shino had improved greatly as well, with a total of 3 different symbiotic hives in his body. The chakra they drained to sustain themselves was too much for him to use any chakra-intensive jutsu, but ideally suited for genjutsu, that required small amounts and great control, and he had proved an excellent student, and with a bit of instruction from Tenten, he had picked a weapon, a simple-looking naginata which fitted perfectly with his style of close-up-natuklos fighting. There were 2 others who had joined the training. Sasuke had taken to training without the benefit of the Sharingan, putting the desire to strengthen himself without the Sharingan through an excuse of not wanting to copy his comrade's skills, while Sakura was nearby with Kabuto, going through an advanced medical text, each sprouting so many things that to the untrained ears of all others present sounded like gibberish. Kabuto, however, was deeply pleased by his students' progress, and his own as well. Sakura had proven to be a natural in the medical arts, literally devouring large quantities of information. He still remembered how she learned the position and purpose of every single pressure spot on the human body in less than a week, and the entirety of the basic human anatomy, the skeleton, muscles and organs, in less than a month to perfection. For all intents and purposes, she was a walking encyclopedia that knew how to apply its knowledge. He had been lightly skeptical at first, but he found that he enjoyed teaching the girl greatly, and she proved an excellent research partner. Though the technique the two were developing could be mildly described as unethical among doctors, Ninja had no such qualms about killing people. If it got the job done. Both of the Jounin wordlessly came to the same conclusion: this generation would surpass them. The only question that remained was when. The only one missing in the picture was Kakashi, but he got stuck with a high-end mission, so that could be forgiven. He did leave a number of scrolls for his students, making sure that they had something to do. Naruto opened the small tube and popped the prescribed pills into his mouth, swallowing the tasteless objects quickly. He never had to drink medicine so far, but Tsunade ensured him that these would help with his healing. It was still somewhat early, it being 7, but night had long since fallen, and if the light coming from the Hokage Tower was any indication, Sarutobi and Tsunade were still there. Still, there were a few more people to visit beforehand. A friend he hadn't seen in a while, despite his promises, of all the, when I get my hands on that blonde for convincing me to get back here and take this job. Arg. Tsunade mentally ranted, glaring at the documents she and her sensei of old were going over. Trade agreements with Sand and Waterfall, the recently renewed peace treaty with Kyumo, and finally, the terms of the new and the plan of the reformed alliance with Sand. After the council finally accepted the idea Sarutobi put forth, it was only a matter of letting the two daimyo come here, along with a representative from Suna, something the oldest daughter of the late Kazekage, Temari, was capable of doing. The daimyos would arrive tomorrow, and things were getting prepared for their visit, and that was when the negotiations would start. Sarutobi was calm on the surface, but inwardly, he was grinning at his student's troubles with the job she was going to take over soon. Ah, the soon-to-come joys of retirement. He'd finally have the time to finish that calligraphy practice he'd been holding off for years. And just after he'd finished cleaning up the village. Life could be so good at times. Still, there was the subject of the root agents in rehab, the records acquired from Danzo's subterranean base, the various resources and research materials salvaged from there. The bloody bastard found a way to annoy him even from the grave. Thankfully, the benefit of said resources would be vast, for Danzo wasn't anything if not thorough and capable. Not that it saved his ass from a compound poison, or as it was officially stated, stress-induced heart attack. Those weren't the only thoughts the old man had, nor the only discussion the two of them held. There was a plethora of ideas and suggestions concerning the changes that should, would, and had to be instated, going from the Ninja Academy, the village security and ANBU operation protocols, down to some of the basic accounting, and minor laws and regulations. Subjects such as reorganizing the Chunin and Jounin teams, providing increased training for current and future genins, reinforcing and reinstating disused border posts and smaller bases popped up frequently, along with requests for an increase in funding from the daimyo for offering further security within the region. An unspoken fact remained, these weren't idle talks of peaceful improvements, but preparations for a potential war. As much as Sarutobi hated forcing heavy training on younger generations, if there was war on the horizon, that training would save lives, mostly theirs, and if it meant sacrificing a few years of childhood, sadly, it was a price he was willing to pay. They had grown soft from the long times of peace, and as much as he hated to admit it, Danzo was right, it was time for Konoha to once more remind the rest of the world just why it was the top dog, though no one stated that he had to use his methods to get there. Within the Namikaze estate, 3 women were enjoying themselves in the private hot spring behind the main house. Kushina knew the place by heart, even though she only spent a scant few months there before the attack. It was a pleasant home, though she noted that Naruto had taken over the room she and Minato had shared a long time ago. Not that she minded, there were a few more very, very comfortable ones. And she helped Kisi pick one out for herself. The house was just as she remembered it, a bit less dust, more mess in the study, and a disturbingly large supply of ramen materials in the pantry, but aside from that, it was the home they were supposed to live in. She felt that small pang of pain in her heart, she missed her husband. But at least she had her son and daughter. It was something to look forward to. "It's really beautiful here," Anko stated in a relaxed voice. Kushina murmured in agreement. Minato was good at this kind of thing. "See those flowers over there?" She pointed to a small garden filled with mostly medical herbs. "He nurtured them from seeds to this. Still can't figure out how he preserved them." A small chuckle escaped Kisi's lips. "What's so funny?" Orochimaru had a set of records he kept on any person he considered a threat. Minato Namikaze was marked off with "avoid at all costs," later on completed with "thank Kami he's dead." He made me memorize all of them, so I'm hardly surprised by most things he can do. Anko merely shook her head in annoyance at the mention of her former sensei, while Kushina watched her daughter with a bit of surprise mixed with disbelief. "What kind of a life did you have there?" Kushina barely whispered, while Kisi merely shook her head with a small smile. "A crazy one," she shortly answered, "and look how I turned out," she shouted proudly, pumping a fist in the air, bringing laughs from the 2 older women. "Where's Naruto?" Anko curiously asked once she calmed down. "He said he needed a while to cool off," Kisi responded, diving up to her chin in the warm water. "What the hell is he up to now?" Anko muttered as she closed her eyes and dozed off, trying to catch a little bit of rest before she had to go back to work. Those root operatives weren't going to interrogate themselves. There, all fixed up, Zaku proudly announced as he and Dosu finally recreated the infamous melody arm that Dosu had used until it was destroyed a while ago in the exams. Life was good for the two former sound ninja, and kin with them. With permission from the Hokage, they opened a small shop that handled repairs of various devices, that being their specialty. It was a far less exciting life than the one they used to lead, but it was also much, much safer, and since they now had a comfortable home at a fair price, along with a profitable business, it was very much comfortable. You think it will work? Dosu asked as he placed the new and improved glove on his hand. Unlike the original complicated machine that was slow and bulky, the new one was nothing more than a plated gauntlet that held the complex sound amplifier, very light and flexible. Yeah, it will, came Kin's voice, we checked it over 5 times already, if anything, it will work better than the original. Now I need to get ready for my date, she added as she stormed into the room in a bathrobe, the Dosu and Zaku running out like the demons of hell were behind them. Tenzo looked at his younger friend with a small amount of surprise. You came to see Gaara? He quietly asked. Yep. Would have done so earlier, but I just arrived today. Have you been looking after him? Naruto responded, twirling a kunai around his finger. Yeah, the kid's fine. Tenzo lightly commented, while there is a bit of protocol about visiting VIPs, I think Ibiki won't raise a fuss about it. So, how did the last mission go? He asked curiously as he ushered the blonde past the secure gates. Better than expected actually. There are a few details I can't talk about yet, but they'll be public knowledge in a few days or so. He trailed off, never mind that, how are you doing Tenzo? Got stuck with this month's guard rotation. Boring as hell, but that sand kid Gaara helped relieve boredom. Did you know that he's quite good at shogi? Tenzo stated curiously. He probably improved after getting some sleep. I guess I'd be cranky after not sleeping for years. Yeah, that couldn't have been good for his mind, Tenzo retorted with a chuckle. Oh, I forgot to tell you, those kunai you made? Worth their weight in gold, he stated jovially. Naruto smiled back. Just glad that they helped as much as you helped me, the younger man answered, bringing a smile to the normally stoical face of the seasoned ANBU. The pair maintained a comfortable silence between them as they descended into the dark bowels of the ANBU prison. Apart from the Caldera fortress that served as home for the worst of the scum, this was probably the safest prison in Fire Country. Jiraiya had personally reinforced the seal arrays along the walls in tandem with Minato Namikaze. For all intents and purposes, even if you were a Kage, if you had the mark of a prisoner on you, it would be impossible to use any chakra whatsoever, something that kept the guards a bit more relaxed about the prisoners, though not by much, since most of the truly dangerous ones didn't need chakra to kill. Soon, the cell in question came into view. Naruto was mildly surprised to notice that the cell was a rather comfortable one. Not to mention that there was a large stack of books in one of the corners. Uzumaki, Gaara stoically stated when he noticed him, but a faint hint of a smile was visible on his face. Naruto on the other hand sported a full grin at the sight of the younger boy. How've you been Gaara? He asked in a calm voice. Better, came the short response. I heard you've been playing shogi. Up for a game? Why not, would you mind? Naruto asked Tenzo, and the ANBU gave a simple nod before taking out the small board and passing it on. Naruto sat down in front of the barred door, placing the board in front of him, and the pieces on it. With a small smile, he pulled the first move. Your turn, Naruto calmly stated, starting with a light opening. So, how did the prison system treat you? My stay was pleasant. I've had time to read, and finally sleep, Gaara retorted. Done an attack this early? Interesting. So, Shikaku is no longer bothering you? I can't hear him at all anymore, it's relaxing. Your move. Tiger has been very helpful, Tiger. Ah, I did ask him to look after you and your family a bit. The final words caused a slight stop in Gaara. You okay? Naruto asked in a worried tone. I think so. It's just, I haven't been much of a family to them, and I've only understood that since a little while ago, Gaara stated in a solemn tone. I know what you mean, Naruto added after a few moments. I've pretty much just come from being introduced to the rest of my family. Your move, Naruto suggested in a warm voice. I see. Gaara stoically replied, before he pulled one last move. I win. Naruto choked on his spit the moment Gaara stated his victory in his usual stoic tone. He realized that he never even saw it coming. I play for about 6 hours every day. Tiger says I'm a fast learner. Gaara chose to explain with a barely visible smirk on his face. Naruto had previously noted that it was nearly impossible to read the red-haired Jinchuriki, as the boy originally had the emotional range of a teaspoon, very much in thanks to the demon sealed inside him and the friendly support of his deceased father. Being cut off from both, and having the chance to talk to a, mostly, normal human being somewhat expanded said range. I don't want to know, Naruto grumbled, threatening to bring an actual smile from Gaara. Anyway, sorry for not coming sooner. The moment I got out of the hospital, I got drafted for a new mission. It's alright, I was sleeping most of the first few days, he quickly replied. How is my family doing? He asked with a bit of reluctance. No idea. I haven't really asked Tiger anything, though I doubt that their situation is any worse, so they should be okay. I see. Well, if you don't mind, I think I'll sleep some more. Come back and visit soon, my friend, he calmly said, an added amount of warmth on the final words which Naruto noticed with a small grin. Sure. Rest well. I'll visit as soon as possible. He turned away, to leave, slowly walking away, almost unaware of the first, true smile on Gaara's face. Only one more thing left to do today. Shikamaru was quietly grumbling. It wasn't that he minded the work, or his team, it was simply that he would have preferred to stay in Konoha and do something relaxing, like play shogi, or watch the clouds pass by. Though he doubted that the mission would be boring, just troublesome. Like the crazy blonde girl that was jumping alongside him. Thankfully Chuji and Asuma were more controlled than Ino, otherwise he'd go insane. Sensei, we're here, Chuji shortly called Asuma, bringing the bearded chainsmoker back to attention. You alright, Asuma-sensei? You've been kinda lost for a while now, Ino curiously asked, smelling a bit of potential gossip in the air. It's nothing, he sighed, let's get back to work. So, if I tweak the basic trap array setup it just might possibly work. Oh, to hell with it, I need a second opinion, Naruto inwardly mused as he was going over a scroll depicting some of the simpler trap arrays he had come across in the short time he had. The complexity was utterly unimportant at this point, though he would seek out more advanced traps once he had a firm hold on the basis of what he wanted to achieve. The idea was simple, but brilliant. If traps could be set to trigger on certain conditions, why not make beneficial arrays placed on someone's body that would trigger when the bearer was in need? The first idea that came to him was a simple, physical, one-shot barrier that would block a short barrage of kunai from hitting the user unaware, effectively reducing any threats from ambushes, though he was still unsure how to force it to only trigger on attacking weapons. He was irritatingly aware that this was the crux of SEAL research, as the creation of a completely new concept, at least to his knowledge, though without any mention anywhere else, also to his knowledge, he was working with terra incognita, was not something to be taken easily, and this was a precise subject, requiring accurate wording, and later, sealing, to the point that a highly capable lawyer would be reasonably challenged. A small mistake would force an array to not only not work when needed, but perhaps have a detrimental effect. And that was only the trigger part, let alone developing the sealing arts, which had very few directly beneficial techniques to begin with, into a reinforcing art. It was a challenge he certainly enjoyed, having some sense how his father probably felt when he was developing the Hiration. Speaking of said jutsu, he just then realized that he had only managed to decipher a third of the array. Though, unlike his current work, it was impossible to do so in public, as he wouldn't dare risk one of the most powerful weapons at their disposal simply to satisfy his own impatience. As his brainstorming was coming to a high, a number of his defensive and observation perimeter clones kept a close watch over him, each of them hinged into an blank-masked ANBU member. It was a sound tactic for providing self-security, and the clones kept a constant vigil over him, also informing him of whoever was approaching if he couldn't sense them through the field of radiance. Soon enough, the Hokage Tower once more came into sight, a mere 3 hours since his last visit, and the lights were still on. I get that they're dedicated, but don't those people have to sleep or something? Well, better get this over with, I want some Anka time for myself, he mentally ranted as he entered the tower, unopposed by the guards. Considering that he had an eerie feeling that the two of them chased him during at least one of his prank getaways, it was somewhat surprising, though he decided not to push his luck more than he had to. He reached the office easily enough, though he knew he had to leave his detachment outside. He was also very much aware of the entire ANBU squad that was looking after the tower, and the likely 5 to 10 squads within a 5-second response range. Genjutsu don't help if you can feel through them. With a cheerful wave to the few he recognized, Cat included, he waltzed to the door, sending a light knock to disturb the two aged politicians. "Come in," came Sarutobi's tired voice over the sound of papers shuffling. Naruto had to suppress a laugh at the sense of a sake bottle being hidden, and just for kicks, he unsealed one of his own. With a wide grin, he opened the door, waving the bottle of rare rice wine with a grin. "Hey old man, I thought since you were working so hardly I'd drop by with a drink to cheer the two of you up," he greeted in a friendly voice. "I don't buy it, but the sake is welcome." "Get your ass in here, Gaki," Tsunade greeted back in a thoroughly annoyed voice. "So?" she asked. After pulling out the ill-concealed saucers and refilling them with fresh sake. Jiraiya, who was also present, was strangely silent, but still acknowledged his presence. "I might have a few suggestions, seeing that you are already having a strategy meeting and all." Naruto slowly replied. "We're listening." "Go ahead, Naruto," Sarutobi replied in his grandfatherly tone, but genuinely curious what the boy had to offer. Fresh ideas were always welcome. Naruto's face turned serious immediately, all nonsense left behind. "If you don't mind, sensei, have you brought up the subject of apprentices?" Naruto asked Jiraiya. "Yes. I will officially take Enko Mitarashi as my second apprentice starting tomorrow. I wanted to tell her myself, but I think it would be better if you did." Jiraiya answered, then turned to Tsunade, who sighed. "Fine. I'm also willing to take an apprentice or two, but I know next to nothing of the current ninja who have the potential," she tiredly stated. Naruto looked pensive for a moment, before he came up with a few candidates. "Dare I suggest Kabuto Yakushi and Sakura Haruno? Kabuto is a true medical prodigy, trained by his father Saito, and Sakura doesn't seem to be far behind. From what he says, she mastered all the basics of medical ninjutsu to the level that it can be applied on the battlefield, as she displayed during the invasion, while Kabuto was the acting chief surgeon for the incoming patients in the hospital because Saito Yakushi was leading the field medics." Naruto explained his reasoning, earning a favorable nod from Tsunade. He was also pleased to note that he was earning growing respect from the future Hokage. "I will take those two into consideration." "Anything else?" she asked him. "Yes. 2 more things. First, since I'm temporarily banned from any chakra training," he said, giving a meaningful look to Tsunade, "I had the idea of helping out at the academy. I am aware that more than a few still have issues with me, and the idea of me teaching at the academy, but I believe that the knowledge I can impart, at least in the area of basic sealing, might give our future genin an edge once they are out of the academy." "I see. And what would you be teaching them?" Sarutobi asked evenly, his curiosity piqued. "I had intended to teach them the basic seals and seal arrays such as the exploding tag, storage array, chakra storage array, the basic blood seals and barrier arrays, the sharpening arrays for weapons." I would also instruct them in the creative use of said seals, with the idea of giving a final test that would force them to adapt what they have for a practical situation. If nothing else, it would help with creative thinking, and it would also show those who have potential for future seal and barrier experts. Naruto finished the first part of his request, earning approving nods from all three. Sarutobi thought it over for a few moments before accepting. Alright then, we agree on this. The academy is short a teacher on the subject anyway. I'll handle the paperwork, and you can contact Irika tomorrow at say, 9 in the morning? Naruto nodded. Now, what was your other idea? Sarutobi responded to his explanation, entwining his fingers beneath his chin. This one is actually for Jiraiya, as one seal user to another. I may have had a very stupid idea, or a brilliant breakthrough, Naruto quietly stated, bringing forth Jiraiya's full attention. Sarutobi quietly nodded, and the two moved to the other side of the room, leaving him and Tsunade to their work. What did you think up? Jiraiya asked, a near childlike curiosity present in his voice. Tell me, would it be possible to rig a seal to respond to a specific stimuli? Such as for instance a person's chakra level falling drastically low? Or a number of projectiles approaching at speed? Naruto asked, bringing a surprised look from the Sannin. I've studied quite a few trap seals and tested a few even, but I can't figure out that part properly. Jiraiya was deep in thought, wondering just what the hell did he come up with? Still, the question intrigued him, as Naruto had proven himself to be a genius with seals, and highly creative. He could remember several highly complex trap scroll arrays used to set up secure perimeters during the last war, when both he and Minato had trained a small group in their creation to support the taking and holding of critical areas. Now what was its name? Dragon something, Dragon's Eye. The entire thing worked on several detection methods, allowing not only triggering via normal entry, but should someone manage to avoid setting it off, it used a secondary method of detecting chakra presences to set off a half-a-second delayed barrage of lethal projectiles. It might be possible, with a little tweaking, he stated. Okay then, here's the idea. Contingencies. Naruto started, bringing a mildly confused look from Jiraiya, before the older man figured out what he meant. Oh, you've gotta be shitting me, he said in an odd tone. Nope, Naruto calmly replied, and proceeded to lay all of his ideas in front of Jiraiya, who actually took out a notebook and began scribbling them down, ideas of his own coming up as well, before he stopped himself. The implications of Naruto's idea were staggering, and that was mildly put. Most ninja went along with the logic that an unprepared enemy was an easy target, as it was relatively simple to throw say, a hail of kunai at an unprotected group of genin, and if they were unaware, they would easily die. A barrier set to activate the moment a number of projectiles approaches would save them with ease, teaching them a valuable lesson in keeping attention to their surroundings as well. With heavily depleted chakra, a system which would automatically replenish it, or worse still, several such interconnected systems. The other thought that struck him was, how the hell didn't anyone think of this sooner? Sure, people made traps, they made containment seals, but nothing like this. He stopped himself before he tried to steal his student's idea. I'm going to do something now, something that every fair teacher should do for their students, and leave this entire research for you to do, he stated, ripping off the first page he had written on, and starting a new one. I'll write down a list of seals, arrays and books that I believe could be of use to you. Also find me tomorrow and I'll have a specific seal scrolls that will help you out greatly. I would also suggest talking to Tsunade about her special seal. Tell her I said it was okay, and you might be able to convince her to talk about it, he added. Also Naruto, if you manage to pull this off, as far as your sealing skills are concerned, we will no longer be sensei and student, but equals. Now, it was Naruto's turn to be awestruck. The comment he made was more to get Jiraiya's attention, he hadn't seriously considered it to be that much of a big deal. Not that he minded. The results of the conversation reached the others in the room even before the conversation was over. Tsunade and Sarutobi, even with their somewhat limited knowledge of seals, had an understanding of what Naruto was talking about and were rapt at attention, interested in the idea. "Go get some rest, Naruto, you're going to need it," Jiraiya lightly commented, tapping his student's shoulder with his hand. "Hi. Unless you have anything you need me for." Naruto asked. "Nah, just go already," Tsunade mock ordered, "and thanks for the sake," she added in a jovial tone, bringing out a loud laugh from Naruto. As soon as he was out, the others turned serious immediately. "He's getting better," Sarutobi commented. "How much, do you think, before he surpasses his old man?" Tsunade curiously asked. "If I had to guess, in about 6 years' time, he'll be able to take on a village, and win," Jiraiya finally answered. A collective shiver went through the spines of all present, as they each privately thanked Kami that Naruto was on their side. Kushina made it a point to make herself busy. By now, Kisi was fast asleep, exhausted from the trip and the events. Regardless of her upbringing, a part of her was still just a little 12-year-old girl, and the girl needed her sleep. She was cleaning up the mess in some of the rooms, keeping wisely away from the study, remembering just what kind of a mess would be there, and just how much time it would take Naruto to find his things should she rearrange them. It was heartwarming to once more be in the place that had become her home, and since Tsunade explicitly forbade any strenuous activity, she had to resort to cleaning around to maintain her sanity. The home was surprisingly clean, though she couldn't tell if it was because Naruto was tidy or because he wasn't at home most of the time, though if the study was any indication, the second was the more likely case. Naruto had moved everything of importance from his old apartment here, including the small pots with the plants inside them, along with the barriers that kept perfect conditions for them to grow. She vaguely remembered Minato doing something similar for the plants outside. "I wonder what this is," she whispered, casually reading over a single paper that stood apart from the rest. She barely started reading when she heard the doors open. A sad smile crossed her face when she remembered that it wasn't her husband that had just entered. "Anko? Mom? Kisi? Anyone home?" Naruto called as he entered, a content but slightly tired voice. "Over here," she answered from the study. Kushina found herself increasingly tired, probably a side effect from the events a few days ago. Tsunade did mention that she'd need a lot of sleep. With a short hug from her son, both decided it might be a good moment to catch some rest. Tomorrow morning, Namikaze's estate, Naruto woke up, much to his pleasure, hugged by a nearly naked Anko, her purple hair tickling the back of his neck. As she nuzzled into him, it was a good way to wake up, he mentally argued, though there was a lot of work to do. He was an early riser, a habit born of the need to slip past people to get a decent breakfast at Ichiraku's before the academy. Times had changed since then, and he was hardly as unpopular as he was then, but the habit never faded, though today he woke at an unusually late 7 in the morning, opting to spend a little time with his favorite woman before he got up, reluctantly squirming out of Anko's warm embrace nearly an hour later, and earning a groan from his lover as she grabbed a nearby pillow in an attempt to keep warmth. He got up and proceeded with his early morning rituals. Entering the comfortable bathroom, he took one long look at his own reflection. It was funny how much he had matured, both physically and mentally, in the past 5 months, gaining a few inches in height, a fully developed chest and shoulders, a few scars here and there, and these ones didn't heal properly, unlike those minor ones from before, most likely a result of them being gained in combat. The 2 most prominent scars were on his left arm, the one on his hand coming from the time he stabbed himself with a kunai to flush the poison out of his body, and the other along his arm from the scythe of the Akatsuki member, Ten, who Jiraiya identified as Haiden the Immortal. The wound had finally healed over the night, prompting a removal of the uncomfortable bandages, but the muscles still needed a day or 2 to completely knit back together. His ability to mold chakra was still predictably disrupted. A minor attempt to create a working henge, and the resulting sliver of pain told him as much. Well, he'd have to adapt then. A small smirk crossed his lips as he rinsed his face with water, mentally noting that it should almost be 8, and just about time for breakfast. Grabbing a comfortable shirt to wear over the black pants he picked up, Naruto walked in the direction of the kitchen on the floor beneath him to prepare breakfast. Naruto was no expert on cooking, he knew as much, but he had just enough skill to make a tasty meal, and he tended to do things with emotion, pouring himself into his work, just as he did with everything else. Kisi woke up a few minutes later, half asleep and sniffing the scent of food. Pancakes. She groaned as she leaped from the bed, dressed herself into a house robe and ran downstairs to eat what she considered her favorite food in the whole world. Naruto. "You're making breakfast?" she half asked, almost stunned in surprise before she remembered the food he made a scant few days ago while they were still in Whirlpool. Yeah. Naruto tried, all the while flipping one of the thin pancakes in the air. "Enko says I'm a pretty decent cook, and I thought you girls might want something to eat before I left." Kisi pouted, "I thought you were going to stick around a bit now that we're here." Naruto offered an apologetic smile, "I'll only be absent for a few hours, till noon at worst, or at least I hope so. Anyway, I'll be at the academy, teaching," he stated with a small laugh in the end, though Kisi didn't get the joke. "Here you go little sis, now what do you want with it?" he kindly asked, effectively plastering a large smile on the girl's lips. "Do we have any honey?" she asked, hoping beyond hope that the answer was yes. Naruto took to thinking for a moment, perfectly aware that there was some left in the pantry, but opting to prolong the situation for a few long moments, before nodding in the affirmative, walking off to get it, chuckling at the happy, downright joyous laughter coming from his little sister. He never realized it before, but he missed this in his life. A family, even if it is a strange one by any standards, brought the warmth he missed greatly, a sense of peace, belonging and origin. It were these things that Naruto truly appreciated, along with the care and love of his family towards him. Consciously or not, Naruto had begun counting Enko into his family a while ago, and on the list of the people he wanted to protect at all costs, she was on the top, shortly followed by his immediate family of Kushina and Kisi, and only then followed by his senseis Jiraiya and Iruka, Sarutobi, Kakashi, the people who looked after him for years, the rest of the people from the Rookie 9, he would gladly protect them all, as soon as he located the damnable jar of honey. Iruka was having a good day. Scratch that, it was a great day. He'd finally gotten a replacement for the SEAL classes he was forced to take over since the last teacher got killed in the invasion. The only thing that worried him was the fact that the Hokage personally recommended someone, but wouldn't tell him who, opting to answer the question with a mischievous, "You'll see." Giving up on guessing just who the Hokage sent, he opened the doors of the classroom he was holding class in, and walked inside quietly, doing his best to ignore the loud voices of the kids who haven't even noticed him. It made him wonder at times if the entire academy curriculum was even getting its job done. He stood quietly, with eyes closed, counting from 10, and giving them a chance to quiet down before he applied the infamous big head jutsu that scared the daylights out of them. Just as he had counted off to 1, the door opened once again, and slammed back loudly, bringing the attention of the entire class to the door, and the person entering. With a sigh, he turned towards the door, and a small smile crossed the scarred man's face as he recognized the young man in front of him. "Naruto." Iruka greeted, "What brings you here?" "Didn't Hokage-sama tell you?" he curiously asked as he grasped the offered hand, glad to see his old academy teacher. "Tell me." "Oh," he started, then stopped, a grin very reminiscent of the young man in front of him covering his face. The many pupils, having been drawn to the new person in the room, saw the foxy grin on Iruka's face, and knew immediately what to expect. "Trouble, with a capital T. Students, allow me to introduce a new teacher who will be responsible for teaching you about seals, Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze." Naruto kept a calm facade as he inwardly cackled with glee at the sight of a classroom full of students who actually thought they had a chance of tricking, or worse yet, pranking him. Still, there was a certain group that he had no doubt had the potential to do so, in a few years. A sly smirk crossed his face when he noticed the wide grin Konohamaru, Udon and Moegi were sporting at the sight of their boss being their teacher. Oh, he was going to have so much fun driving them into the ground on this. For their own good, of course. He even had Irika's full support on teaching the little rascals a few lessons. By now he was getting annoyed by the growing sound of the entire class talking, most of them about him, the rumors and other nonsense, while many others were curious what the new teacher was going to, well, teach. He began quietly tapping his foot on the ground, leaking just a tiny bit of killing intent into the room, and counting to 5, giving them the time to quiet down. Of course, by the time he had reached 5, not only had they not quieted down, they were in fact louder than before, something that he realized he found very, very irritating. There were a few that were completely silent. Hanabi Hyuga, younger sister to Hinata, was an image of what a Hyuga, to their mind at least, should be: proud, eerily quiet, and arrogant, or as others would put it, with a 10-foot pole stuck up their ass. She stayed quiet because it was unbefitting of a Hyuga to make noise needlessly. Konohamaru was another BU that was only a testament to the respect he held for Naruto. There were several others, like a young boy with black hair, who he remembered was named Geku Azashi, cousin of the more famous Hei 8, a civilian girl by the name of Mayday Kimari, who apparently had a strong drive to become a real kunoichi. Then there were Udon and Moegi, who, while every bit the pranksters and kids Konohamaru was, were also the children of ninja families that both lost over half of their members in the recent years. It was little surprise that their respective grandparents Koharu and Hamura were very protective of them. Out of a room of around 30 of them, those were the ones he knew had great potential. Naruto had remembered the pictures from the files he was given to read over. It was a joke for him to memorize a measly 30 people, and all the information concerning them he was given, already building an image of the overall skills here. However, he knew all too well that those images were generally faulty. He himself was the runt of his class, and look how far he got. If there was one thing he promised to do, it was to get these kids a good chance, and to flush out any potential they had, providing them a better chance to survive in the field, or to root out those unfit before they died a needless death. "Quiet," he shouted, lacing the voice with just enough killing intent to make the command work. The room was instantly filled with silence as every eye was turned to him. "My name is Naruto, and I'll be your teacher in the arts of sealing, as Iruka-sensei already stated. You can call me Naruto-sensei, or shortly Sensei," he spoke in a perfectly flat tone. He hid a smirk as he felt half the class take a collective gulp. "As long as you don't make a mess, and try your best to learn what I have to teach, you will have no problems." This time the entire class swallowed hard. The stern face he kept vanished instantly, to be replaced by a foxy grin he was so famous for. "Now that that's out of the way, let's get started. What can you tell me about seals?" he asked. Silence still reigned. With a small sigh, he decided to break the tension, picking a kid seemingly at random. "You there, Kimari," he said, pointing at the girl. Said girl slowly got up and started, nervously speaking. Seals are symbols that when chakra is applied to them create various effects." She barely managed to finish the sentence, obviously worried for the trouble she was going to get in. Naruto, on the other hand, slightly frowned. While the definition was childish at best, it was also surprisingly accurate, if a bit off target. "Not bad, Kimari. You're almost right. But what kind of effects?" he pressed on, curious what the girl would say. Any?" she tried, a definite worried look on her face. With a calm chuckle, Naruto's features softened. "That is absolutely correct," he calmly stated, bringing about the surprised eyes of his now captive audience. "Thank you, you can sit down, Kimari," he offered, cracking his knuckles as he approached the large blackboard and picked up a piece of chalk. "Now to expand on what she just said. Most of you have seen seals in one form or another. The rather common storage scrolls and exploding tags being among them. However, you must understand that seals are truly capable of anything. I will teach you the basics, give a solid foundation to build on for those that wish to learn more, and leave those who don't with solid knowledge that will likely save your life one day," he explained in an passionate voice, easily keeping the attention of the entire class on himself. He didn't really have to turn around, as his field of radiance gave him a perfect image of the entire room. Now let's start, shall we? I am going to write down the basic seals you will need. These are the majority of the seals that are used to form arrays, and apart from a number of special ones, all you will ever need, Naruto explained as he began drawing the shapes of the basic seals. He started with the simple chakra storage seal, the battery that ran so many arrays, continuing with the 5 chakra converters, of each respective element of course. The third thing to be written was the storage seal, likely the most complex thing they would be seeing. In reality, that was the simplest of the life seals as it actually dealt with the time/space continuum, but the sacrifice required to create and activate it was just a few drops of blood, so it was safe. He stopped for a moment, running out of room on the board, and thinking over what more he should write down when he noticed that the class was simply staring at him. Well? What are you waiting for? A written invitation? Start writing these down now, he ordered, a light chuckle escaping his lips as he walked over to the nearby desk and unsealed his calligraphy set and a small, empty scroll, quickly writing down an array on it, one that would help demonstrate just what he was talking about, and serve as a reward for those who try their hardest later on. Now that you're finished, I'll explain just what these seals do. The first, he pointed to the one on the left, is a chakra storage seal, a rather simple, but very important part of almost any array. It serves to store chakra, and release it on demand. How? We'll come to that soon. The next 5 are the chakra converters. Their purpose is to take normal chakra and turn it into one of the 5 elemental natures, being wind, water, fire, lightning, and earth. Now, before we go any further, let's demonstrate just what a combination of these can do. Any volunteers? He asked. Only Konohamaru and his friends raised their hands while the others were curious, and slightly worried. Fine. Konohamaru, get over here, he beckoned with his hand, deciding on a far more practical approach than the scroll he originally intended. He looked at the board and noticed that he had drawn the chakra converter for wind right next to the chakra storage seal. Pulling a short line between the two to connect them, he motioned for Konohamaru to activate the array with a mischievous smile on his face, well hidden from the rest of the class, silently mouthing "Give em hell." Konohamaru Sarutobi was having a great day so far. First, his uncle Asuma decided it was about time he taught the kid a few simpler moves with his, not that surprising, wind affinity, and the flying swallow that Asuma often used proved to be an interesting addition to his skill with a staff. Then he got to the academy, to learn they were getting a new course on seals, and a new teacher to boot. He was positively ecstatic when he found out that said teacher turned out to be his boss and idol, Naruto. And to top it all off, he had just been invited to join in what was obviously a good prank if the grin and the glint in Naruto's eyes was any indication. So he did as he was told. He placed his hand on the large seal and sent as much of his chakra as he could. The results were rather entertaining, as a strong burst of wind blew from the blackboard to the rest of the room. While not strong enough to wreak the intended havoc, it was strong enough to display just what Naruto tried to explain, and make sure that a bunch of papers flew around, while messing up everyone's hair. The dumbfounded looks on their faces were priceless. This, kids, is a simple pair of connected seals activated by a boy who has the chakra capacity of your above-average genin. And that's without any additional controls. Now imagine what a full seal array is capable of. He stopped for effect, letting the ideas form in their heads. And before I go on, I'll demonstrate the others. For instance, this fire converter here, he placed his finger on the aforementioned seal, turns chakra into fire chakra, which if not immediately consumed by something. He stopped, sending a pulse of chakra into the seal, letting out a stream of flame a meter long, ignites. Same thing happens to the rest of them, with water drawing moisture from the air and lightning creating enough static through chakra, except for the earth one. Earth chakra can only affect earth, it cannot draw it from somewhere else. Now, I'm going to write down the rest of the basic seals we'll be using before I start the lecture part." A groan broke in the room, and Naruto could do nothing but laugh. He would, and probably had, done the same. "Don't worry, it will be short, but very important." He tried to quell their fears. Nobody liked meaningless lectures. Naruto continued to write the second set of seals they would need: the basic blood seal, a delaying seal, standard trigger seal used for basic traps and exploding tags, the sharpening seal used for weapons, a minor barrier seal. He was surprised but annoyed that the kids didn't ask any questions. He had a vague feeling that they were afraid of him, and that he had messed up. If the kids were afraid of him, then they wouldn't learn as well as they could, and potential talents in the area would be wasted, a luxury he, nor Konoha for that matter, didn't have. Thankfully he had an idea how to handle it. A short look at the clock displayed it was 10:30, and that he still had an hour and a half to work with. "All right, now for the lecture." Cue collective groan, and a light chuckle. "First of all, you should know that there are 3 categories of seals, each further divided by complexity," he explained, raising 3 fingers in the air. "The first category are chakra seals, which are the most basic ones that deal with manipulation, storage and transformation of chakra in one form or another. The second group are barrier seals, which deal with the creation of various barriers and fields out of chakra, or various materials by applying chakra to them." He stopped, taking down 2 of his fingers. "Before I explain the third group, you should know that all seals come with a price. Most of the time, their effects merely demand chakra. However, the third category, the life seals, are fueled by our very life. To create, maintain or activate them, one has to make a sacrifice of some amount of life force or blood. The basic seals I will teach here from that group require a sacrifice of but a few drops of your blood to work. The storage seal and blood seal are 2 of the weakest, but most commonly used life seals, and will be among those you learn during the following month. I will also be teaching you the other main skills of sealing, and that are identification and breaking, referring to the ability to identify the purpose of an array, and do completely break it, neutralizing its effects." "Any questions?" he asked, glad that he had seen a growing interest in the students as a number of them raised their hands. A content smile spread on his face, and he answered as they took turns to ask him about everything that came to mind concerning both seals, and often enough himself. "Won't we need our textbook, sensei?" one of the kids asked, Izashi if he remembered correctly. Naruto smiled in response before answering his question. "If you work hard, by the end of this year in your Genin exams, not only will you not need it, but you will be able to write a better version yourselves," he answered, bringing a number of odd looks from the kids. By the time noon came, Naruto found that for the first time in his life he felt like he fitted in. The feeling was something he hadn't desired in some time, as all related needs were easily fulfilled by his growing circle of family and friends. The students, none of them older than 10, accepted him without reservations as the news of his status, both familial and as a Jinchuriki, was made public a scant few days after his departure to Whirlpool, and had surprisingly little effect on them. Apart from rampart curiosity. To think that they even asked him about the Reaper Death Seal on his navel, and that he actually showed them and explained almost all he knew, to the growing interest of boys and the blushing of more than a few girls, much to his entertainment. But he couldn't say that he wasn't happy, or that he hadn't enjoyed the day. The students proved more than quick on the uptake, as by the end of the 3 hours he had devoted to them, more than a half could easily repeat and write the basic set of seals he had taught them. More than 2/3 understood how to connect the seals together, and the remaining third had more issues with drawing the seals correctly than connecting them. Several even showed potential to become experts in time, by the same crazy creativity he himself was graced with. A final thought possessed him to leave them a bit of creative homework. They were think up a working array with the seals they were given. He had no doubt he'd find some downright crazy and dangerous things there, but that was the point. To force them to think and adapt. Analyze, adapt, apply, were the first words he had read from a basic sealing manual over 2 years ago, a creed he accepted and lived by. the book having been given to him by Sarutobi in his last year of the academy. Though it took him a long time to figure it out so that he could apply it, once that part was over, any seal that fell into his hands was quickly broken down to its basic components, studied, upgraded if possible, and turned against all those he called enemy. He would show them how to do the same. And the reward he offered, a fully completed barrier array that was strong enough to stop a crank jutsu, was tempting to them. For better or worse, he was looking forward to the next class he would be holding in 3 days' time. With a final smile he let everyone leave the room, idly going through the paperwork he was supposed to fill out. It took him only 5 minutes to understand just why any person in a position of respectable power groaned at the very thought of paperwork and thanked the heavens above that he knew how to perform the shadow clone jutsu. Still, he decided that for the first time, he would carefully check what was required of him. One of the more important papers was the attendance list, consisting of the names of every student in the group, along with daily grading of every student, and a bunch of other statistics, though he had to admit he was vaguely entertained by the paper marked off collateral damage. For some reason, the idea that teaching in a shinobi academy actually could bring down the school wasn't that hard to swallow. Enko smiled sweetly at the sight of her beloved teaching. She had the day of, but decided to take a check on Naruto's antics, and was very much entertained and gladdened to see him teaching, the vibrant smile on his face as he explained the intricacies of his art to the students. He was rarely so happy, she sadly noted. Her life wasn't much better, she also noted, though there were happy moments that these days more often than not included the blonde young man who acted far beyond his years. She chuckled at the thought that he could be so silly and childish at times, and yet, all serious when it mattered most. She would never say it, nor admit it, even to herself, but she envied him for it. If anyone had taken the chance to see her then, they would have failed to find the usual, sarcastic, dangerous Enko, and would have seen a loving young woman wistfully spying on the object of her affections. Funnily enough, Ibiki Marino decided today of all days to pay a visit to his old friend in the academy, instantly noticing Enko on his way. With a small, barely visible smirk, he put the information away for later teasing. He still owed her for the coffee incident. Sadly enough, he didn't have the time to mess with her today. The honored guests, alias the daimyos, would be here in a matter of hours, along with their sizable entourages. Shaking his head from the though, he continued walking. He had better things to do than be annoyed by politics. 1205 Hokage Tower, Office of the Hokage, still unsure it was a good idea? Sarutobi turned to his Suntobe successor with a satisfied smirk after reading the report. Tsunade chose not to grace him with an answer as the older man victoriously chuckled, winning yet another bet against Tsunade. Legendary sucker indeed. When do the delegations arrive? She asked, trying her best to shift the focus of the conversation. In about 2 hours at most. Scouts and guards have reported that the fire daimyo is an hour away to the northeast, and that the wind daimyo is at about the same distance to the west. I've also sent orders to help prepare the Sabaku siblings for the visit. I would suggest you get ready as well. As far as I remember, you never had to deal with such negotiations, and it will do you some good. Hi sensei, Tsunade answered in a sarcastic tone, even further annoyed by the job. Why did I accept this again, she wondered. Still, at least the worst of the first part of her preparation for taking over the position of the Hokage was over. By now, she had a perfect memory of every law, regulation and treaty that affected Konoha. It was an annoying part of it all, but she persevered. She did agree to the damn job after all, and all thanks to that crazy brat Naruto. 1300 hours, Namake's estate, and speaking of the devil, he was currently going back home, his mind set on spending time with his family. A strange smile was decorating his face during his entire walk, while he answered the friendly greetings of quite a few people. It still surprised him how the opinions had changed once the full announcement was made. Then again, he left all such thoughts slide as he reached the forested pathway that led to his home, making one last check on the food he had bought for his family. He still couldn't get used to it. He had a family, Kushina, Kishi and Anko. His family, and he'd go against the Shinigami himself to protect them. With a mild chuckle, he walked on, enjoying the sounds of the forest around him until he reached the gates, where those sounds were replaced by others, those of his sister and lover childishly arguing over the last piece of food. Holding in his laughter, he opened the gates, walking towards the door. He didn't really need to look to know what was going on as he heard his mother's voice, "Ladies. Naruto-kun is home," she chirped, calming the two younger women down near instantly. He knew he had noticed Anko a while back, as she was spying on him while he was teaching, so he was slightly surprised that she was here already, but then again, he had spent a while shopping. "Hey everyone. I brought some food," he offered in a happy tone, placing down the still slightly smoking paper bag in his left hand on the table. "Naruto-kun, you didn't?" Anko asked in a loving voice with a wide smile on her face, and a small trail of drool on the corner of her lips. Naruto chuckled before kissing her and removing the steaming hot platter of dango from the bag. He knew how much she liked the stuff, as much as he generally liked ramen, though he had cut down on it greatly. He made a mental note to visit the Ichirakus one of these days. He hadn't seen Ayam and Tucci in a while. For the time being, he pleased himself with the sight of his beloved and his sister stuffing their faces full of dango, while he and his mother chuckled from the side. "I brought you something as well, Mom," he quietly added, pulling out another steaming plate. Kushina's eyes widened as she recognized the dish. "How did you?" she muttered as he sat her to the table with a dish of roast duck in honey in front of her, her favorite food of many years. "Dad was trying to figure out how to make the food, and I found the recipe in the study," he explained, letting out a smile. "Minato never was good at cooking," she longingly stated, but blowing up the kitchen. "That he was an expert on," she jokingly added before cutting off a piece of meat and eating it. "Naruto, don't tell me that after 15 years the black scale still has the same chef," she asked, licking her lips in the progress. Naruto confirmed. "The old scoundrel sends his greetings, then I'll have to pay a visit one of these days," Kushina responded, returning to her food, while Naruto did the same, pulling out a third plate for himself. The meal continued in general silence, if the four of them eating could be called that. Anko and Naruto actually tried to behave civilly, but when they realized that both Kishi and Kushina had even less manners, both grinned and dived in wildly. "Just so you know, Naruto, Sarutobi, Jiraiya and Tsunade will be coming for dinner tonight," Kushina stated, making a short break in her eating. "Oh?" he commented, slowing down his own meal for a very short time. "That's nice. Who's gonna be cooking? You or me?" he asked, finally putting an end to his meal. "I'll do it." "I have something of a need to do it," she argued, while Naruto merely nodded. He felt no need or reason to deny her. If it made her happy, all the better. Still, something worried Naruto. A feeling of dangerous times ahead, a feeling brought forth not only by his own experiences recently, but from some of the events, rumors and other things he overheard. He had little doubt of the course ahead, but he was also aware that the choice he had made would leave him with little free time for his family. Kushina wasn't the only one who noticed the shift in his mood. Kishi had visibly slowed down her eating, and so did Anko, though he knew little sister kept her eyes on her older brother, trying to figure out what he was thinking. "It's no use," she heard Anko whisper conspiratorially, "when he gets like that, not even Ibiki would be able to figure out what he was thinking about." "Is he really that hard to read?" Kishi continued. She confirmed with a nod. "He seems to have taken that after his grandfather, from my side of the family. Father never was easy to figure out." Kushina noted, remembering Izaro Uzumaki, her father and former king of Whirlpool. After lunch, all four of them moved to the living room, sitting themselves down on the couches, and talked, Naruto and Anko of their lives in Konoha, Kushina of her past, and Minato, while Kishi talked much of her experiences with Orochimaru. At some point Naruto summoned Gamakichi and introduced him to Kisi, who hadn't yet seen the small toad, though Kushina had already met him once before. 1400 hours, Konoha, officially, ninja villages were rarely used as places of negotiation for a very simple reason: one does not walk into the lion's den without expecting to get eaten. However, Konoha had a very strong reputation as a peacekeeper, and the visit of a foreign daimyo along with their own ensured that there would be no interference from any loyal forces, and with the dissolution of all root forces, the only other potential internal threat was neutralized. The guards were on high alert regardless, especially because this presented a rather alluring opportunity for outsiders to attack and lay the blame on Konoha. The political and economical damage from such an event would be staggering, not to mention that it would start a war. There were two large groups entering the village hidden in the leaves right now, the daimyos of Wind and Fire, each escorted by 100 of their bodyguards, along with emissaries from the temples of Wind and Fire overseeing the procession. The political system of the 5 great countries was simple, divided between 3 actual powers. First came the daimyo, and his samurai legions, which formed the bulk of the country's regular military and peacekeeping forces. The second faction was the temple. A semi-religious institution that comprised of a large number of monks and priests, the first group taking care of protecting the various temples and burial grounds along with religious monuments and pilgrims, while the second took care of various religious needs. The third faction were the shinobi. Most of the time, the 3 worked independently of each other, however. In times of war, all 3 groups worked together without fail, under the supreme command of the daimyo. During negotiations between nations, or in this case, for reparations for the invasion of the sovereign territory, the other 2 groups would be present to ensure the optimal conditions for their side. The procession from the west belonged to the nation of Wind, dressed in the traditional sky-blue robes and armor, along with a palanquin that carried the daimyo and a suitable army to protect him. The 100 warriors represented the finest that could be found within their land, all dressed in excellent scale armor, and well armed with a combination of spears and swords. The one from the east came from the Fire Country's capital, the traditional fiery crimson uniforms of the samurai easily visible in the snow, while the monks, dressed in lighter robes, walked alongside the army, while the daimyo himself rode a horse to Konoha. Unlike his Wind counterpart, he was more of a warrior, and instead of silken robes, wore a heavy-set suit of armor, with a large, double-bladed axe strapped to his back, one he had frequently used during the many battles he had fought. Misako Nobuna's, tall as your average bear, and just about as tough, rumor had it that he'd wrestled quite a few in his youth. Broad shoulders covered by armor plates, large arms and hands that moved at an unnatural speed in combat. Piercing hazel eyes surrounded by already grayed shoulder-length hair and a short beard. He was a man in his early 80s, a contemporary of the 3rd Hokage, but still just as strong as he was in his youth. This too was the subject of many stories and rumors, but regardless of them all, he remained the ruler of Fire Country for over 50 years, and stood unopposed for the throne, as those who did oppose soon found themselves challenged to an honorable duel. His numerous children and grandchildren loved him, along with the rest of the Fire Nation, as the man stood as a pillar of stability through the numerous wars that tore through the region. The fact that the man did what was best for the country only helped his popularity. The only thing that dwarfed the man in the entire procession was perhaps his horse, a large black charger that had seen as many battles as his master. His name was Wrath, simple, but very intimidating to his opponents, no less than his bulging muscles or hooves, nor the bloodthirsty stare in his eyes. It was a beast of war, meant to bring fear to the hearts of his enemies as he charged over them. The group was composed of his finest soldiers, as he didn't believe in having bodyguards. His would-be assassins didn't either, mostly since all but the stupidest outright refused assassination jobs on him. The men were hand-picked for the division he himself led in combat, the greatly feared Honored Legion of Fire. The armor they wore was the same as his, except slightly heavier. Misako himself was very interested in the negotiations. Konoha had soundly beaten an enemy with little to no losses along with capturing several political prisoners along the way. And while that spoke well of Fire Country as a whole, and him as a leader, it also spoke of Konoha and its by now former leader, Sarutobi, along with their ninja. He wasn't an uninformed fool, as not only the ninja had access to wide amounts of information. Jiraiya of the Sannin often shared his bits of sensitive information, for some he had gathered from his own. Such as the detail that the Jinchuriki of the nine-tailed fox was in fact the son of that annoying brat Minato Namikaze. Even after 20 years he still couldn't figure out how the man won that game of poker, swiping the land where he had intended to build a summer home for his own estate. Gambling arguments aside, he respected Minato for two reasons. One was because he is loyal to a fault, and had the balls to send anyone who gave him trouble over it, Misako Nobunaga himself included, to hell, and because he was a perfect shinobi leader, a genius born once in several generations, and according to his reports, the son wasn't far behind, already labeled a wunderkind when it came to seals and already earning a rather intimidating name in the bingo books, along with going to great lengths for a genin to help out in the counterattack to the invasion of Konoha, not to mention his later battle in Whirlpool. He just might have to pay the brat a visit and meet him for himself. Nobunazesima, his adjutant, a relatively, compared to him, young man of 43 by the name of Toggle, called him, stirring him from his thoughts. Yes, he shortly responded, voice in its usual calm state. We are approaching Konoha, sir. Toggle pointed at the gates. Good, the old daimyo responded, his hands clutching the reins of his horse, the beast of war letting out a seemingly amused neigh. He learned over the years that his horse understood him far better than his wife, likely because they shared more battles and drinks together. I have no doubt they already know we're here, Misako commented. It should be an entertaining welcome. If you say so, sir, Toggle responded in a monotone. And indeed, the welcome had proven to be interesting. Unlike most of the shinobi villages, Konoha had a sizable civilian population, to the point it ranked as a minor city, rather than a concealed village. The populace had gone outside to greet their daimyo reverently, the path cordoned off by the shinobi equivalent of a town militia. Ever since that unpleasant incident with the Uchiha, the job wasn't exactly popular, but still, they did a good job apparently. Misako gave a wave here and there, offering a grizzled smile to the people and to the occasional masked veteran ninja he recognized, and being saluted in turn. They never did figure out how he knew exactly who it was behind their masks, and he wasn't telling. After all, they said it themselves, you don't give away your secrets lightly. He could hear a similar procession coming from the opposite side of the village, knowing that the Wind Daimyo, that fool Tumei Kira, was coming. The man was a capable but vindictive and power-hungry, and he had triggered the invasion in the first place. Having inherited his position from his father, rather than having to earn it like he himself did, meant he had considerably less experience than he did, a situation he didn't mind in the least. He was already informed of the contents of the treaty Konoha was going to offer, and considering the trouble that was brewing, he himself approved. Old wars were long since past, and the hostilities from the Third Shinobi War had to come to an end if both nations were to survive. It was an annoying thing, but it had to be done. 1500 hours, Hokage Tower, the council chambers. Tsunade was slightly worried. The events now were a baptism by fire if she ever saw one, but she was relatively at peace. She had Sarutobi as her advisor, and Nobunaga as her ally, along with a rather fair offer. Even with her relative inexperience it would be an easy matter. Greetings, Lady Hokage, Lord Daimyo, Tumei offered, a calm, emotionless smile on his face. Tsunade did a mental rerun on the information she had on the man. He was a coward and a fool in many things, but when it came to politics and money, he was dangerous. He wasn't greedy that much for money as he was for power. The late Kazekage had opposed him in a number of matters, so he returned the favor, by sending a number of high-paying missions over to their neighbor, Konoha. As allies, it wasn't really an issue for him to do, but it dealt a severe blow to Tsunagakir's economy, and it opened a door for reptiles such as Orochimaru to extend their influence. Tomidono. A pleasure to see you, Misako courtly retorted as the three people who were to speak took a seat at three different tables, each so placed that there was an open podium in between, dedicated to the few visitors that would be arriving. Shall we begin? I am sure all of us have duties, and it would do no good to tarry, Misako kindly offered. Indeed. Tumei sighed. Formally, I am honor-bound to defend the interests of Wind Country, and by extension Suna. However, I only learned of the invasion after the act. Honestly, it's one big mess and I want to clean it up as soon as possible. Both Misako and Tsunade were surprised at the openness with which the man spoke. Tumei wasn't known as an altruistic person, though the situation was hardly to his benefit anyway. I agree with that, Misako retorted. I believe you received a copy of the restitution offer? Tsunade asked. Yes, and I agree with it. However, he paused, it wasn't the main reason I came here. Our alliance has so far stood solely on paper, and I have number of reports of a group called Akatsuki operating both within Wind Country and abroad. I am more than willing to share the information I have in return for your own. I believe that the organization is a threat big enough to warrant a higher degree of cooperation. Tumei explained, intertwining his fingers and laying them beneath his chin. What do you think, Hokage Dono? Misako asked, though he already had a good idea of the answer. Tsunade made a show of talking to Sarutobi, though both had already agreed. It was merely an added benefit that Tumei offered it, but even though they agreed, merely agreeing instantly would infer that they needed it more than he did. Your offer is agreeable to me, Dono. In that case we have covered two major points of our meeting here, which leads us to the third one, the fate of the prisoner software interred here, especially the children of the late Kazekage. Tsunade retorted after a few minutes of deliberation. And then we will return to the subject of the Akatsuki. Acceptable. I assume you set the chamber so that the three of them would have a place to stand, the youngest of the three, Tumei asked. Correct. Tsunade stated, giving a short look to one of the two adjutants that stood next to her table, and the man immediately walked outside. The room remained silent for a precious few minutes as the three present groups suspiciously started each other down, waiting either for one side to make some sort of mistake or for the guests of honor to arrive. Thankfully, the second came true much faster, as three figures were escorted inside under guard. Gaara, Temari and Kankuro were unbound and escorted more like guests than prisoners, and Tumei noticed the gesture, along with the fact that they were in surprisingly good condition for prisoners. Now then, you three understand why you are here? Misako asked politely, a thoroughly shark-like grin on his face. Hi, Daimyo-sama, Temari answered, 1900 hours, water country, cabin aboard the Blue Swallow. Kakashi tiredly took a look at the paper in his hands for the final part of the instructions, and they were hardly pleasant. His entire team was already in position, scattered along the port city he was supposed to use as an insertion point. A high-profile intelligence gathering and object extraction mission. Not something he was looking forward to, but then again, since it was a Shrank operation, there really wasn't much choice as to who was going to do it. But then again, it wasn't like he minded much. While he wasn't as much of an adrenaline junkie as some others, he still liked the thrill of a hard job. He took one last check over his equipment, making sure the tools were in place, before opening the door of his cabin and walking out to the corridor that led to the main deck. He would need to leave just a few minutes before docking, to avoid drawing any attention. Thankfully, night had long since fallen, and the limited moonlight that shined through the cloudy sky made his job that much easier. He idly wondered what his pupils were doing, how Sakura and Sasuke's training was going and how Naruto's mission to retrieve the next Hokage had gone. He'd have to pay a visit to Naruto's new home once he got back, as he heard he had moved to the Namikaze estate. No time like the present, he mumbled under his breath as he moved to the ship's right edge and prepared to jump off, as soon as he was in the clear. 2100 hours, Namikaze estate. Ever since Naruto moved in, the estate had regained some of its old life. Now that Kushina and Kisi joined in, the place was truly lively once more. The flower garden that surrounded a good part of the family home had been raised from stasis, and was once more under Kushina's tender care, while her daughter joined in, happy to learn. All the dust that had gathered was cleaned up long ago, and the place once more felt like a home, rather than merely a building where someone resided. And tonight, it would be livelier still, as 4 guests approached the house. Kushina was keeping herself busy with cooking. While she wasn't the housewife type, she was an excellent cook, a fact that a number of people, starting with her late husband, deeply appreciated. And beyond that, she very much wanted to cook for her family. She was slowly but surely getting used to the changes that occurred, and while her beloved was no more among the living, she would move on. Enko was the one who opened the door, and noticed the additional visitor. "Hello Enko-san." Tsunade greeted her. "Tsunade-sama, Saradobai-sama, Jiraiya-sama," she greeted by reflex, nearly ignoring the last guests. "Come right in, dinner will be served soon," she shortly offered, showing them in before guiding them to the dining room. "Kisi, set up for another guest," she called the girl, as she finally realized who the other guest was, and froze up for a moment. She hadn't greeted him. At that point she could only hope that it didn't reflect badly on Naruto. Naruto came down some 10 minutes later, joining everyone in the dining room. Unlike Enko, his perfect memory didn't give him the luxury of forgetting faces he had seen somewhere, and he had seen the face of Misako Nobuna's more than just once in the books. "Oh shit," were his only thoughts as he forced a smile on his face and walked into the room, offering a court greeting to all guests present. Series ends here. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to like and subscribe, and don't forget to share this video with your friends. Guys, make sure to help the author by visiting the link in the description. This is Fox Sage, and I'm signing off.